Kia ora koutou everyone, welcome along to our council meeting today, 21st of May 2025. I'd ask you to stand for councillor affirmation and karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai. Ihi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. And the council affirmation. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense and wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thank you, everyone. Firstly, welcome along to all the guests that are here today. Thank you for coming and showing an interest in the matters that are in front of Council and the decisions that we'll be making. We have everyone is here today, so there's no apologies. I haven't had any identification of any extraordinary business that's not currently on the agenda, Sharon. Is there any conflicts of interest that councillors would like to raise ahead of the meeting? If there's anything later, just let us know as it comes up. And in our public forum today, we have a number of speakers. First up, we've got a presentation around the public artwork that's been put into the centre of Rolleston and Toro Atua. I'd ask you to come forward now. Maybe they're still coming. So Bill Bradley is here. Bill, you're up. Next, if you want to come to the front of the room, thank you. And Bill, the microphone in front of you, you're welcome to take a seat. The microphone is just the right-hand button. There we'll turn it on, press it once to turn on, press it again, and it'll turn off. And we've allowed about 10 minutes for this conversation. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and the floor's yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Now this is the second time I've been here regarding this problem. It was probably, might have been 18 months, 2 years ago, regarding infrastructure damage by contractors. Nothing's been done. The guys are still out there doing it. This time round, it's getting a wee bit more serious. I've got both the tender forms here for your eroding and your water. So if the council don't have copies of this, you're more than welcome to have this, and it spells out the requirements of the tenders that were put out for the both departments. Now, I would have thought of a council of this size would have somebody on their staff that were able to read those documents and act upon them. But at this stage, it does not appear that you have anybody that oversees the infrastructure of that kind of work, unless you employed somebody just recently. The issue that I have was mainly with water races, the damage. The previous time, they were chopping into fences, digging out fence lines, weirs, pipelines, anything and everything. Just clear fell through. They did actually reinstate a weir. They've now gone back through and ripped them out again and destroyed a fence line. Now, I would estimate the damage on my property in the vicinity of about $20,000. Now, the thing is, it's not going to cost the council anything to remedy it. So we don't have to look at your budget and say, hey, where are we going to find $20,000 from? It's an insurance claim against the contractors for the damage. And I would like to think that the council here would make sure that damage is repaired. And we've had a couple of your representatives. We had Lydia. I've had a Carl Innes. He came out very good. He was very good. We sorted a fair bit of the problems out, and we're going to look into it. The thing is that why is the council not having somebody in a department somewhere to read these and police the matters to make sure that when these contracts go out, they are abided by? And with roading, the grader drivers have been instructed not to grade the roads. They go out and they move the gravel around, and that's it. And you've got a hell of a repair bill on potholes. Like your Selwyn Distress Council is a disgrace as far as roading goes in your infrastructure. If you maintain the roads properly, but no, they're not maintained, and they just fix them, and they're making good money fixing potholes rather than not having them in the first place. So I don't know where we go on this one, because the previous time I was here, nothing was done. And that same contractor is still out there. I passed their machine on the water race there between Kirwee and Aylesbury this afternoon coming through. They're still out there. So is it council policy to turn a blind eye to this? Or are you as a council prepared to do something, or put staff on that can police this matter? I'm not the only one that's getting damage done around the place. So I don't know where you're at. It's my grouch today was, why aren't you doing something about it? And is this council here prepared to do anything? That'd be my question. Would you be prepared to do anything?
Thanks, Bill, for presenting that to us. It actually sounds like from what you've said we are doing something about it, and having Kyle and Lydia turn up is a part of the council responding to your previous requests.
Yes.
The matters you've brought before us today, Sharon will report back to us, investigate what you've raised with us, and that will be part of a future report back to council. Councillors, are there any questions that you have around what's been presented? Elizabeth?
Hi, Bill. You were saying others are having the damage as well. Have they also come out and had Lydia or staff investigate damaged work on the
that
areas?
I don't know, but it seems to be just ongoing. I can't specifically say who's about, but I know
Yep.
they're not just picking on my property to do it.
Okay.
They don't have competent. Even the machines in here, they've got to have machines to do the job properly. It's spelt out in here, and just a slight tweaking in the machine they've got, and that's what I said the last time.
Okay.
Now it says that they're to clean water races,
Yep.
not dig them. And this is my issue at the moment. They've got massive big excavators in there, and the operators are not trained for that work. And we do have an issue that probably the water race ranger is not being there to tell the digger driver where pipelines are. They're just not doing it. So my place can't be the only place. In the previous time, we did have a meeting there, and we had the neighbours there, and we had a group of us there. But there's very little being done, and that operator is still going. And it's the big issue that we have is everybody's clipping the ticket on the way out. That we're, instead of ringing up the one guy and say, hey, do this, do that fence, or do this cleaning, you have about 3 or 4 different outfits from here. It probably goes to Cord. Cord get on the phone and they ring up, it's Curl from Springfield, ring them up, and they ring up somebody else and everybody's clipping the ticket. And this is where the money is just going down the drain, left, right and centre, because there's too many not doing anything that's clipping the ticket as you go through. So, yeah.
Thank you. That was excellent.
Thanks, Bill. We appreciate you coming in today. And as I said earlier, Sharon will report back to us, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Can I just ask a side issue at the moment? With the flooding at Mochikarara area, a good friend of mine just had a bridge wiped out, and he can't get to the back of his farm, so half his farm out. Is this a matter for the council to decide on, or do you have mayoral fund that we can call upon to assist the reinstating the bridge so he can get to the...
There is some support available, and we've asked the Minister for some extra support from government around welfare matters for people. But what I'll ask is the CEO to talk with you on this particular matter outside the meeting, and then you can explain it a little bit further.
Well, it doesn't need to be, because it's urgent. The guy's only got half his farm that he can get access to,
Yep.
and it comes down.
Okay.
So that's okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Well, thank you.
Next, we have a focus on the Upper Selwyn Huts, and I'll just note that we will bring forward the agenda item in today's agenda to be the first thing that Council talks about through the meeting, so that those that have come for the Selwyn Huts conversation don't have to wait around for it. We've got 4 speakers. First of all, Carolee and Graham Young speaking and presenting, and then Keith Morrison, then Susan Rogers, and then Graham Evans. So if Carolee and Graham Young would like to come to the end of the room. And
Oh, sorry, our barrister's waiting and she is one of the speakers instead of Susan Rogers. Can she go first, please?
sorry, I couldn't actually hear what you were asking then.
Sorry, our barrister is waiting to speak and she's one of the speakers instead of Susan Rogers. Can she go first?
Is that Claire Lenahan?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I've got her listed to join Carolee and Graham. Is that part of the same presentation?
Yeah, she's taking the first topic.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you.
Claire, if you can online there, welcome to the meeting, and you've allowed about 10 minutes for this conversation. So thank you for what has been shared and circulated already. And I don't know if you can see the room, but we've got the councillors, the key staff for today's matters on the agenda, and a number of people in public forum. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I can only see yourself and the Chief Executive, but I'm sure everyone else is there. So, tēnā koutou, everyone, ko Claire Lenahan aho. I represent the Upper Selwyn Huts residents and just want to briefly go through my correspondence to the council, which I think you've received a copy of, but probably haven't had a chance to read. So, the community will talk to you about a number of issues, but the 2 that I'm going to focus on today, well, the main one really, is with the proposed licence term options for consultation that have been put forward, which only have finite terms of either 5 years or 2, which add up to 30 years. And in the residents' view, these finite terms unnecessarily restrict options open the council has, and likewise restrict options for consultation with the community. And the other issue I've noted is the downgrading of the significance of this issue by council to moderate from significant, but the community is going to address you about this in a lot more detail. I'm really just going to talk to the first matter. So just at point number 3, in italics, I've put there what the community are seeking be added to the options before for consultation, is adding a 4th option, which is triggers with no end date relying on environmental conditions, which I think the council has already considered at some stage. And in summary, the reasons for this are just down at 3, little Roman numeral 1. Council is not bound by a finite term under the Reserves Act. These licences are granted under a different piece of legislation, quite archaic, 1924, the Reserves and Other Lands Disposal and Public Bodies Empowering Act 1924, which I'm just going to refer to as the Rolled Act from now on, just to help with timing. So there's no limit on a licence term under that Act. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I understand Council has been given advice and considers that there are finite terms under the Reserves Act, but the licences are granted under the Rolled Act. The second reason, little Roman number 2, the council is also not bound to have a finite term by virtue of its 2019 resolution that said licences should be short term and finite. The reasons for that resolution were in relation to wastewater, and they no longer apply. And council also resolved in July last year to pause the process under which a finite term of 15 years was proposed. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, just turning over the page. The third sort of summary reason is in deciding the appropriate term for a licence, it is important to consider the purpose of the reserve. In 2015, the council sought the Crown via the Department of Conservation, who manages the underlying land, change the reserve purpose from recreation to local purpose reserve for hut settlement purposes. This is a very specific purpose, and hut settlement includes the idea of a community of people, and there are also significant historic and heritage values to consider. And the fourth summary reason is that given council must manage the reserve for this specific purpose, in the absence of reasons to grant a shorter or finite term, council should grant licences for a term consistent with the continued existence of the hut settlement. And then I won't read out item B, that's the significant and engagement issue. So now I'm just going to move down into the detailed reasons of the summary reasons that I just talked about. And the first important one is, under what legislation is the actual power that you have to grant a licence? So the Crown is the registered proprietor, if you like, of the reserve, and the Department of Conservation is the responsible department, and you, the council, are the administering body for the reserve under the Reserves Act. So the council has previously advised that it grants the licences to occupy the reserve pursuant to section 61 of the Reserves Act, which I've set out in Appendix 1, which sets out the powers in respect of local purpose reserves. As this reserve is not vested in the council, only the commissioner, who currently is the Director General of Conservation, can grant a lease, which for limited purposes which don't apply here. There is no power in section 61 of the Reserves Act for the council to grant a licence over this reserve or any other provision in the Reserves Act for this reserve. And way back in 1999, Buddle Finlay provided legal advice to the council that the power to grant a licence for these huts is pursuant to section 168.2 of the Rolled Act that I've just mentioned. And at point number 8, I set that out for you, and I'll just give you a wee minute to sort of jump down to subsection 2, and where you see Lake Ellesmere Domain Board, that is now the council. So if you just want to read that, I'll give you a few moments. And you're all little specks, so I can't see when your heads have lifted. So perhaps
you carry on, Claire.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. So at point number 9, only the Governor General or the Minister of Lands can grant a lease over these reserves, and the council can only grant a licence. Point number 10, the grant of a licence to occupy under the Rolled Act is subject to other provisions of the section, and I won't read those out again. I don't think they matter too much for today's purposes, but I've set them out there just for completeness. And then moving on to point number 11, the Rolled Act has never been repealed. It's still in force. It's been referred to as the relevant governing legislation for these huts in a 1979 case, Downs versus the Commissioner of Crown Land, which related to a refusal to approve certain building proposals. So just to summarise, the only power for the council to grant a licence over the reserve is under the Rolled Act. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is what term can be granted. And I've briefly mentioned that the council, this is at point number 13, has noted legal constraints in the Reserves Act to limit licences to a maximum of 33 years. And the council considers it cannot grant a licence longer than this. At point number 14, as I set out above, council can only grant licences under the Rolled Act. There's no provision in that act limiting the term for licences, nor is there any guidance as to an appropriate term. So at point number 15, the reserve is still a reserve under the umbrella of the Reserves Act. So it's relevant, there are relevant considerations to guide what term is appropriate alongside the Rolled Act. And these would include the overarching purpose of the Reserves Act, the specific reserve classification, in this case local purpose reserve for hut settlement, and lease and licence terms available for various types of reserves under the Reserves Act. So at point number 16, I go on to give you some examples of the types of terms. So little number 1, a lease over a historic reserve can be granted for a term not exceeding 33 years, that's with or without a right of renewal, perpetual or otherwise, for the same or any shorter term, but with no right of acquiring the fee simple. And you'll just see there's a lot of footnotes in this opinion, and I don't expect you to read them. They're there for your lawyers. But there's a reason why at footnote number 16, these terms are sort of said to be 33 years. And that's because under the Resource Management Act, If a lease is granted for a term of 35 years or more, it's deemed to be a subdivision. So that's why you see those terms of 33 years, just to avoid that issue of subdivision. Little number 2 on page 5, a lease over a local purpose reserve for a term not exceeding 33 years, with or without a right of renewal, perpetual or otherwise, again with no right of acquiring the fee simple. Little number 3, same again, leases and licenses over scenic reserves for 33 years with the ability for further similar terms to be granted. And little number 4, I think you get the gist of it. So point number 17, the longest term for a lease is 33 years with a right of renewal, and it could be in perpetuity. And for licenses, 33 years with the ability for further similar terms to be granted. And for licenses, terms is plural. It's not restricted to one further term of 33 years. So just by way of summary, there's no limit on the term of a license under the Rolled Act. Guidance under the Reserves Act indicates licenses can be granted for up to 33 years with the ability for further similar terms to be granted with no limit specified. And the reserve purpose is relevant to consider in this instance. Moving on to the second point, Council is not bound by the 2019 resolution to require a finite term in terms of the options that are currently put forward to be consulted on. So point number 19, residents are concerned that Council is still relying on its May 2019 resolution to justify imposing a finite term, or here to justify putting options forward that have finite terms. So for example, hut licenses and subsequently renewals are short term and ultimately for a finite period. We talked before about that's where the proposed 15-year finite term in 2024 flowed from this 2019 resolution. At point 20, reasons residents consider Council is still relying on this resolution to justify or support a finite term for the next phase of consultation options include: on the 5th of March 2025, the Council publicly excluded workshop about the Selwyn Huts states under the heading Guiding Principles and Assumptions. The deed of licence is finite, regardless of whether this involves triggers or a set date. The meeting agenda for this meeting includes 4 references to either the 2019 resolution and or a finite term, and I've listed those sections. At point number 22, the most concerning of these is under the heading Licence Term Options, and the first sentence in section 5.2 states, on the 8th of May 2019, Council unanimously determined that hut licences and subsequent renewals are short-term and ultimately for a finite period. Section 5.3 goes on to state this
Sorry,
section of
Claire,
the Council...
if I could just...
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, is your intention to read through this whole document to us? Because we don't have time for that to occur today. So I'm just wondering, are there some other particular points you want to bring out from it, or is your intention to stop soon anyway?
No, look, that's a good point, Your Worship. What I can do is jump to, because you said it's quite long, I had hoped to read a little more quickly, but that was unrealistic for me. I think what I can do to sort of truncate matters is I will just, if you flick to the end of the opinion, so if you go to page 9 at point 49, and what I've done there is I've got a summary, and I've already talked a little Roman numeral number 1. I've already talked a little Roman numeral number 2. And if you flick over to page 10, I think the most important one I'd like to just talk to you about, sort of in conclusion, because I can see that my time's going to be up soon, is I think it's really important. Well, firstly, you might be asking yourselves, doesn't the question, in terms of the options that you've put forward, there's a question at the end of those 3 options with the finite terms, do you have any other feedback? And some of you might think, or all of you might think, well, that's broad enough to include, anything the residents want. But I don't think so, because the council, as the administrator and land manager, has an obligation under the Reserves Act to manage the reserve for the purpose for which the reserve has been classified, and that is the local purpose hut settlement, as I've discussed. And in the opinion, in the letter, you'll see when you get a chance to read it, that a hut settlement, it's not defined in the Act, but it has the notion, the general meaning of the word settlement has the notion of community and a people living in a community. So really the purpose of this reserve is about the people living in the community. And as you know, there are also historic and heritage values associated with that reserve. Now the council has an obligation to ensure that the reserve is used for the purpose that it is classified for, that it's enjoyed for that purpose, and that it's preserved and protected for that purpose. And I think if you put those things all together, and the fact that the council isn't limited for a finite term, that there's an obligation to grant a term and consider granting a term and put forward as an option to be discussed and consulted on, that the longest term possible is able to be granted, subject to, things like climate change, etc. The residents, accept that these issues may arise in the future, but there's an obligation on the council to ensure that the residents have the longest term possible, given the purpose for which this reserve is managed. So I think that's really kind of the nub of it, and that's why the residents are imploring council, I think, to add one more option to the 3 that are already before you today.
Great, thank you, Claire, for that. Councillors, is there any questions that you have of that presentation?
No, I do.
Deborah.
Thank you for your presentation. Can I just ask some points of clarification with regards to, you quoted a piece of case law in Downs and the Commission versus the Crown Lands, and I note the date is the 8th of November 1979. So if a licence to occupy was actually formulated, say after the 1999-89 amalgamation, would that not supersede the meaning behind that decision?
No. One of the take-home messages from that decision is that the Rolled Act, the 1924 Rolled Act, and not the Reserves Act, is the relevant piece of legislation when granting a licence or a lease for these huts. So any of those subsequent changes, unless that legislation is repealed, which it hasn't been, it continues to apply. And because it's so specific, any later general pieces of law that you may think might be inconsistent with it, there's a general principle of law that the specific always overrides the general. So it's still in force, it continues to apply, and there is no power for the council to grant a licence under the Reserves Act. It is only under the Rolled Act, but the Reserves Act is the umbrella legislation, and it continues to apply over the top of the Rolled Act once the licence is granted.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's handy to actually be able to read the whole decision, so where extracts are actually taken out, you can actually see where they actually sit within the whole of the legislation, so thanks for explaining that. I've got another question, and I guess it's under the Rolled Act, and I'm just wondering, under the Rolled Act, are they not? Is it for the sale of land where a policy decision is not a major policy decision, not affecting, so people can actually dispose of that land?
Do you mean dispose of it under the Rolled Act?
Yes.
No. So any disposal of the land, the Rolled Act, it's a very, very long piece of legislation, but the pieces of it that apply to the huts are very, very limited. It's Section 168, and there's nothing in there that relates to the sale or disposition of the land. Any consideration of the sale or disposition of the land is governed by the Parent Act, by the Reserves Act 1977.
Thank you. Next presenter, our question is Sophie.
Oh, yeah.
Sophie. Oh, Shane's on. Sorry, you're sitting there.
Kia ora, Claire. Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone that's turned up here today. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. E roi mana whenua. Kia ora. Thank you very much, Claire. Obviously, it's a lot of information to digest at a quick clip. So, from what you've rightly pointed out is the owners of the land. Have you had correspondence, or the community had correspondence with the owners and with mana whenua?
sorry, by the owners, do you mean the Crown?
Yes, as you rightly pointed out.
Well, no, because the council is the Crown appointed the council as the administrator and manager of the reserve, and so as long as the council is exercising the powers it has under the Reserves Act and the Rolled Act, it doesn't need to consult with the Crown. You're right, there are some instances, depending on what it wants to do, where it does have to consult with the Crown and iwi, but I don't think those situations are before you today. Where it's the grant of a licence and it's under the Rolled Act, there's no need to seek the sort of permission, if you like, or the need to consult with the Crown.
So in your point 49, given point I, the first one, council is not bound by any finite licence term under the Rolled Act, would you then agree that it is council's right to determine what is appropriate?
Yes, it is council's right to determine what's appropriate, and it needs to do that, as I set out in my opinion, by referring to the relevant provisions of the Reserves Act. So, what is the purpose of the reserve? The reserve is for hut settlement purposes. It's a local purpose reserve. What is the role of the council? What are the roles and responsibilities of the council?
Understood.
And, as I've said before,
Thank you. So just
yeah.
following on from that, then what we're discussing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is occupation of and licence to provide services to. Do you believe the wording that council has used refers to occupation of the land and not the right to provide services to the occupiers over a period of time? Specifically,
I think in terms of the options, I'm just going to bring them up again. The options, I don't know if they talk about services. So in terms of the term of the licence, which is what I'm talking about today, it just talks about at section 5.4, the fixed term. So it doesn't in those sections refer to services.
Okay.
That may be somewhere else. So I haven't, my letter, my opinion doesn't direct the advice to that. It's about the term of the licence and the options available.
Thank you. And there's another paper here, so I don't know where this paper's come from, but just if you let me finish, Sam, in here, point D says, before making any further decisions, consider and respond to our barrister's opinion. I believe by the recommendations put today in C, we are agreeing to consider all of the information that's being provided through the current process.
So we'll get to that when we get to the debate on this. At the moment, it's a chance to ask the presenter anything in particular. And I note that we've got another 3 presenters to talk to us on Selwyn Huts.
Speaking to us today. I've only got one question, I promise. So regarding local purpose reserve as hut settlement, I've been trying to find what the definition, if there's any legal definition of what hut settlement is, because as you've rightly said, it includes the notion of a community of people living together. New Zealand legislation is kind of, well, maybe other countries as well, it's notorious. You've usually got the interpretation of the definitions of all the various terms in there, but of course the Rolled Act is that old that it didn't exist then. But I can't see anything from 2015 or anywhere that defines actually what do we mean by a hut settlement. Even the minutes of the council meeting back in 2013 don't seem to define it. So, as promised, the question, do you have any more insight for us about a definition?
That's a very good question, and it isn't, as you've noted, defined in either. Well, it wouldn't have been defined in the Rolled Act because when that came into force, it wasn't defined as a hut settlement. That only happened in 2015. You might want to go back through the council files, because it was the council originally. I think I put this in a footnote in my opinion. Doc suggested local purpose community, but the council said no, we want local purpose hut settlement. So look, quite often, councillor, things aren't defined in legislation. That's why I went to look at the dictionary definition. That's a standard approach, in any litigation or trying to ascertain what the meaning of something is. And I think it's, pretty clear that any way you look at it, a settlement is a group of people. Huts is probably an unfortunate term to use, but that's a little bit irrelevant in a way. It's about the settlement, it's about the people, and the people in this locality. That's the focus and the purpose of the reserve.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. And last question is from Megan.
Yes, kia ora. Look, thank you for providing your legal opinion, and I think that regardless of whether or not you go through the Reserves Act or Rolled, we're all actually concluding that council does have authority to make a decision. So legally, any decision council make is safe from ultravires. But what I'm not really following is the relevance of the 2019 resolution being challenged, because my understanding is with each council term, it's inherent that we are not bound by previous decisions and that information is provided by way of background only. And there has been some resolutions made in this particular term that relates to this, this decision. So I'm trying to understand the legal relevance of what the 2019 argument is here.
Me too.
Okay, great.
No, I say that, sorry, that was a little bit in jest, but it keeps getting mentioned, and the point of it is it keeps getting mentioned and it has the word in it, finite. And so finite keeps sort of appearing. And when it was mentioned in 2019, it was in relation, as I've said, to specific circumstances in relation to wastewater. That's no longer an issue, but the finite term keeps getting brought forward, relied on, and 2019 keeps getting referred to. So it is confusing. And what I was trying to term, by the Reserves Act, it has the ability to grant a much longer term, and in fact may have an obligation to do so because of the purpose of the reserve and the obligations of the council to manage it for that purpose.
Okay, but there's no evidence in being background. All of our decisions so far have not been because it has been said in 2019.
Well, it's sort of debatable. I think if you just could take out the reference to 2019, it would make life a lot simpler. Still left with the term finite. Let's pretend 2019 didn't happen. There's still this term finite here.
Yep.
The residents were just trying to make sure it's not because of the resolution of 2019. And my point about my opinion, my letter, is to say I don't even think it's appropriate or useful to use the term finite, because you need to look at the purpose of the reserve and your role under the Reserves Act, and that doesn't limit you to, for example, a 30-year term that you've got in your options.
No, great, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. You generated a lot of questions from us, so thank you for providing that clarity after your presentation as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Koutou.
The next presenter is Keith Morrison. Keith, welcome. Keith, I think the microphone in front of you just need to press the right-hand button and the red light will be on, and then you're away.
So it's on now, is
It's
it?
on, yes, thank you.
First, I'd like to acknowledge the community group which has just spoken, the lawyer spoke for them, and say that we respect their point of view, but wish to communicate to the council that our community group holds a different point of view. The group within the Upper Selwyn Huts community I represent appreciate this opportunity to address the council and seek to make 5 main points. First point, there are multiple community groups and points of view within the Upper Selwyn Huts community. Our community group represents those who recognise the privilege of holding a licence to occupy a reserve, and particularly we value the special recreational and wildlife values of the Springston South Reserve. We have always recognised, based on legal opinions we obtained prior to signing our first licences, so has over the 3 decades we've had licences regularly renewed them, but we know that it cannot be taken for granted. The second point, a change in the community occurred over the last 10 years when the council allowed renting and individuals to obtain multiple licences. This turned the reserve into a site for real estate business and a type of de facto social housing, which has interfered with the recreational and wildlife values. We consider the council made a mistake and request the council to correct it. But if the council insists on managing the reserve as a site for social housing, as well as a recreational and wildlife reserve, we request that the council do it properly. Namely, the council become the sole landlord for the huts that become rental accommodation, not licence holders. And they must work with the Ministry of Social Development to ensure that those most in need in the wider community get the accommodation. And it must ensure that the accommodation is maintained to healthy home standards, and, in keeping with Housing New Zealand, ensure that rents are linked to the income of those deemed most in need. Third point, the change has brought division and conflict within the community by creating 3 tiers, namely landlords holding multiple licences, ordinary licence holders, and tenants. Moreover, it has resulted in overcapitalisation by those who hold more than one licence. This has occurred due to them failing to carry out due diligence about the nature of their licences. We, however, find it hard to understand how this could be the fault of the council. Instead, we see it as a fault and responsibility of those who have overcapitalised and who are now disingenuously crying foul. Let's put it this way. Since when has it been the role of the council to bail out failing businesses? Fourth point. There are, however, members of the Upper Selwyn Huts community who truly are vulnerable. To ensure duty of care toward them, we argue, requires the council to ensure 3 things. A, to recover an inclusive, supportive community by establishing a council-chaired community committee that every family, both licence holders and tenants equally, can have a representative on if they wish, and where advisory to the council decisions are made by consensus. B, to ensure current and future licence holders and tenants are fully aware of the end of licence horizon, as well as the special recreational and wildlife values of Springston South Reserve. And C, to provide ongoing guidance to licence holders and tenants alike about how to prepare and plan for the necessary adaptation when the settlement is eventually, inevitably, closed down due to the effects of climate change. The 5th and final point. We are grateful for the willingness and compassion of and by the council to once again plan to renew the licence. We are grateful that the council has put in a sewage pipeline that has made this possible. But we consider that it is the responsibility now of the Upper Selwyn Huts community to pay for it, along with also paying for an eventual upgrade of the community sewage infrastructure to fix leaking pipes. We consider that it is unhelpful to vulnerable members of the community for the council to play up to a delusional sense of entitlement and victimhood held by some in the community. We consider the delusion to be self-destructive for those who are truly vulnerable, as it hinders their adaptive capacity to plan for the future, manipulation and bullying. Furthermore, we consider it to be abusive of other ratepayers in the district to expect them to pay, because they paid for their sewage infrastructure when their sections were developed, and the costs per licence has always been a free gift of privilege. We are also grateful for the council's patience. It is 9 years now, almost to the day, that Mayor Calvin Coe started this process by hosting a meeting with the community. We are grateful that a final decision will now finally be made this September. Now for 2 small details. We support the proposed bond for when the huts have to be removed or demolished. We know it is a responsible act of compassion by the council. We know this because we've been informed by an insurance company that a bond will cost licence holders less than if we have to pay for demolition ourselves. Finally, we fully support the proposed regular checking of the huts on the reserve for compliance. We know this to also be responsible kindness on the part of the council, as it is always best to address issues while they're still minor. Thank you once again.
Thank you for that, Keith. Tools to happen, or was that to allow people to live there 365 days a year, or was it another mistake that you're referring to?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm specifically referring here to allowing rentals, but also people to obtain more than one licence, because that only came in over the last 10 years or so. Ever before then, you could only ever obtain one licence, and for some reason, over the last 10 years, people have been having multiple licences and then renting them out, and that started this whole business of people creating businesses, which really has interfered with the whole community feeling and everything, and it's created these 3 tiers.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth.
Keith, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is you've suggested that by the rentals you've got a de facto social housing situation which affects the wildlife values and recreational aspects.
Yep.
I was wondering if you could give me some examples of what you mean by the effect on the wildlife values and recreational from those more vulnerable people living there. The second question is, you've also stated that your members are truly vulnerable at the hut, but your group wishes to request that the council considers that all of the wastewater costs and additional costs are paid for by the community. You're obviously fully aware of what those costs are proposed, and how do you feel that the vulnerable members of the community will be able to afford these $7,000 or $8,000 a year for those costs?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. It's not as if everybody else in the community doesn't have to pay anything. Everybody else has to pay a lot more than that. They've either got a mortgage or they're paying rent, which is a lot more than $7,000 a year. Those with licences are very, very fortunate, very, very fortunate privilege of not having to pay rent, not having to pay a mortgage. And it's out of the kindness of the government to allow that. So that's where I'm coming from. That you've even got a licence is a great privilege, and that allows people to have that much more. Like I've mentioned before in the council, my wife works at the freezing works, and we are so much better off than most people there because they're paying $600, $700 a week to rent in Rolleston. What do we pay? Not up to $20,000. So $7,000, that's totally possible for anybody. There's so much less than what anybody would pay rent or mortgage. That's where I'm coming from. So the vulnerable people are very fortunate if they only have to pay $7,000 a year. To answer your first question, I'll give an example. The people who are vulnerable are the people who are being bullied and abused because they don't fit into the group who are running it as businesses. They're the ones who are vulnerable. Those who like living there because of the natural environment, those who like gardening, they're being abused and bullied because they don't play up to people just trying to make money out of the place and then claiming to be victims when they're actually being given this gift. And it really is very distressing when you point it out to them. And also, they're exclusive. People are not even allowed to be part of the council neighbourhood support group. Even though our group set it up in 2003, we're now excluded from being part of that, excluded from being part of the civil defence group. This is the process which is occurring because of how the changes occurred. And so the recreational values of enjoying their gardening, that's being interfered with because we're being abused, mocked, excluded. That's what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Keith, thank you for coming in and providing the perspective for us as we consider this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next presenter is Susan Rogers. Welcome along today, and I think one microphone's probably still on, the other microphone will just need to press the right-hand button. About 10 minutes for the conversation, and the floor's yours.
Okay, thank you. My name's Carolee Fee. I'm here representing Susan Rogers. I'm talking on the Upper Selwyn Huts, and the topic I'm talking on is the issues with the Selwyn District Council's report you're presenting today. Both of our speeches, so Fiona will be talking on the next topic, both of our speeches have been compiled from the considered input of many people on behalf of the Selwyn Huts Owners Association, who represents the majority of the community. We'd like to thank Tim for his hard work and how he worked tirelessly to slowly build our trust in the council. We wish him well and a fast recovery. Although our relationship with him started off rocky, to his own admission, he experienced a steep learning curve, and we ended up in a position of mutual respect, much agreement and understanding. Unfortunately, the majority of that information appears to be lost in his absence. This council report is appalling. You appear to have ignored all of our over 200 written submissions, legal opinions, our barrister's oral submission in July last year, and all of the recommendations of the Jacobs report. You have wound back our future occupancy strategy to pre-March 2024, and in the process you have lost all of the trust Tim and the engagement team had repaired over the past 14 months. Guiding principles. We believe the foundations for the multiple errors in this report lie in the guiding principles listed. Your principles are: the deed of licence is finite, the time frame for a retreat can be no more than 33 years, there is currently no funding available for any options. The 33-year and finite principles are not factual. The Jacobs report findings also do not support these principles. How can you as councillors make fair and just decisions if your starting point is so significantly flawed? Significance classification is incorrect. Why have we been reclassified from high significance, which triggered a special consultative process, to moderate significance, allowing for only feedback? The reclassification to high significance confirmed by Tim in the minutes of the licence holder meeting in August last year was a result of our barrister's opinion to you in 23rd of May, her oral submission 24th of July, our own oral submission to the long-term plan, and our other council meetings and other multiple written submissions. Everyone is in disbelief. We are all asking, if we were high significance then and nothing has changed, why has it been reassessed to moderate? We have asked for the detail of this decision and haven't yet received it. Our legal opinion dated 23rd of May 2024 presented to you last year, outlining all the reasons why we should be classified as high significance, still applies as follows. 1. The high level of community interest. 2. The huge impact on the community members and the high numbers of people affected by the loss of their homes, their life savings, lack of housing alternatives, and the emotional and financial impact of having to demolish their homes at their own cost. 3. The decision does not logically flow from a decision already made, as the 2019 resolution is no longer relevant. The decision is inconsistent with previous policies of the precedent of renewable licences for 130 years. It is also inconsistent to council-commissioned expert opinions. 4. The proposal would result in the permanent loss of a physical and community resource that has significant heritage value and should be added to the Selwyn District Council's District Plan Heritage Schedule. The proposal would be irreversible once implemented. 6. There is high public interest indicated by ongoing media coverage locally as well as nationally. 7. This is not a situation of urgency. Additional to these points, we also argue that a finite decision impacts on a strategic asset of the council, being a local purpose reserve for the purpose of hut settlement, and the effective disestablishment of a Selwyn district township. For these reasons, we request the council continue to classify us as high significance, consistent with the August 2024 classification. Other issues with the council's report. Other than the flawed guiding principles and the significance classification, other errors in this report include, but are not limited to, the council does not own the land. Despite the image portrayed in the words fisherman hut, our homes are dwellings suitable for permanent living. We are disappointed that most councillors have not come out to visit us when invited to see for themselves the community you are voting to remove. We've even been asked by senior council staff, do all of our houses have kitchens and toilets? We continue to request details of cultural reasons and ECAN concerns, but have never received these. As always, we are happy to work with different organisations to mitigate any issues they might have, but we have not been given any opportunity to do so. You recommend wider public consultation, but why are you asking the public about removing a township and making people homeless? Given that the affected owners bear the greatest impact, the consultation process should prioritise our voices over the wider community. The public perception stems from the misleading narrative that we are constantly impacted by flooding. This was most recently driven by press releases from the council earlier this month stating we needed to evacuate as we were in danger. This was simply not true. We have been unaffected by flooding for 130 years. It is important to note that many people do not realise we have a completely different situation from the lower Selwyn Huts and Gree Park Huts, and being constantly linked together with them is misleading and incorrect. We appreciate the council needs to collect outstanding monies owing to them. We recommend 6.6 arrears option 2, or longer if possible. That's 6 to 12 months arrears solution, but with the inclusion of a payment plan which would meet the requirements of this option. Your environmental retreat proposals, especially 5.5, which is broad and leads to uncertainty of tenure, are incredibly concerning and touches on triggers. The Jacobs report did not recommend triggers at this time and concluded more scientific research would be required to ascertain relevant triggers and thresholds. In conclusion, it is without doubt we need more time to consult with your staff about outstanding issues, such as trigger points, environmental retreat, licence term, protecting the settlement's heritage, district-wide rates, arrears, helping reduce the council's duty of care concerns, bonds, building inspections, our feedback on the Jacobs report, and most importantly, giving you time to process and respond to a barrister's letter presented today, as well as our district-wide rates legal opinion sent last year. Additionally, we have started our own investigations on determining actual fire risk and ways we can reduce this if necessary, and we have contacted ECAN to open an ongoing conversation to determine actual risks to our stock bank rather than acting on your concerns without proper data. Because of our concerns, incorrect significance classification and the factually flawed guiding principles, we ask the Council to vote on consultation option 2, that you do not adopt the current consultation proposal. We suggest that we continue our current special consultative process, which has not been completed. This is confirmed by the outstanding issues section of the Jacobs report. We do not necessarily require an external engagement team to continue this process. We are knowledgeable about our concerns and our settlement, and we are motivated to help you address them. Thank you.
Carolee, thank you. Fiona, did you have anything you wanted to say as well?
Yeah, I can go now if you wish, or if you want Kiralee to take questions.
I wasn't sure whether you wanted to present together or separately. So
No, I beg your pardon. I don't mean for the mix-up of names. I'm following Claire and Kiralee, so
Okay.
I will take Graham Evans' spot, please.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. So any questions then of Kiralee? No. Well explained. Thank you for the submission. And Fiona.
Okay, thank you. Kia ora, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. Now, Council has not lawfully justified a finite term, and the 2019 resolution being relied upon for this decision is no longer relevant. Jacobs and your expert reports also do not support a finite term. You have a legal obligation to preserve and protect our local purpose reserve for the purpose of Hut settlement, including its community and its heritage values. The Council are unfortunately failing to meet these legal obligations. Our historian's report recommends that because of the heritage value, the Upper Selwyn Huts, 1, should remain on their current site, 2, are entered on Heritage NZ Pohira Taunga, beg your pardon on that, list as a historic area, and 3 are added to Selwyn District Council's District Plan Heritage Schedule. Before decisions can be made, this historic report needs to be understood by Council. Now, since at least 2017, Council has been focused on ending our time at this reserve. Over this time, you've provided a large number of reasons, all of which have either been resolved, disproved by your own expert opinions, or have not reached the threshold for finite. We acknowledge Council has raised other concerns, and although they do not trigger a finite decision, we are still working through them and finding appropriate solutions. If I could mention here as well the recent weather event of 1st of May, Minister Mark Mitchell himself, after visiting the Upper Selwyn Huts on the 2nd, when speaking to media, indicated there is no level of concern about our safety during that event. We were also interviewed by RNZ's morning report, where we described exactly what happened during the recent weather event, how we were able to use all of the available information and make a well-considered and safe decision that despite what was being reported in the media, evacuation was not required. I believe a copy of that was emailed to you all this morning, so hopefully you've received that. If I can highlight also, please, MP Andy Foster, who has thoroughly reviewed all documents released by Selwyn District Council about our future occupancy. He has also reviewed our legal opinions and he has heard our community views. Yet every time we see him, he asks us the question, why do Selwyn District Council want you gone? And our reply is that we simply do not know. So we ask you in one sentence, without using the 2019 resolution, how can you legally justify why the next term should be finite? For these reasons, as our barrister has already suggested, we ask the Council please to add a 4th licence term option to 5.4 in the report, being an option D, an open-ended term with triggers. We'd like to remind the Council that your decision needs to be based on scientific fact and the law. Our barrister has provided you an opinion that disputes your ability to enforce a finite licence at this time. Additionally, your decision on the consultation process should not be influenced by the timing of your elections. Rushing this process is leading to issues with accuracy and, once again, the loss of trust that had somewhat been repaired. So in conclusion, 1, we ask the Council to redefine your guiding principles so that they are factual and lawful. We support consultation option number 2, which is continue to classify us as high significance and continue to address all of the remaining issues with the special consultative process which began last year. 3, add an extra licence term option in 5.4 of the report being option D, an open-ended term with triggers. And D, before making any further decisions, consider and respond to our barrister's opinion presented today on the licence term options and the powers and obligations of the council. And lastly, if I can just urge you, please, councillors, to just stop, remember the council affirmation that we heard at the start of the meeting. So just please stop, take a look at the facts that have been presented to you today and make your decisions accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for that. And any questions from Sophie?
Yeah, thank you, ladies. I don't mind who answers.
Okay, thank you,
just
Sophie.
saying. I do have two questions, but I can see lots of people, so I will just go down to one of them. I'm kind of confused regarding the message that you're giving us regarding triggers, because on the one hand you've said that the Jacobs report didn't recommend triggers at this time, but then also saying we would like an option that involves triggers and no finite date. So the main part of it is, can we just put together what exactly you would consider an okay trigger? Because looking at the Jacobs report, it was basically because there was such a lot of variance between what people thought would be an appropriate trigger. So, for instance, water flowing through houses isn't a major concern because we'll clean up and build back. If it occurs multiple times per year, they might be more concerned, but likely not to be tolerable to everybody. It kind of, and then there's stuff around insurance and the ability to get insurance, the ability to access four-wheel drives. Some do not want to plan and will deal with things as they arise. So if we have no end date and triggers that are going to be very difficult to achieve, because no matter how much data you've got, if somebody goes, oh, but I'm fine with that, that is also part of the data set, you know? So if there's no plan and difficult to set triggers, how do you reconcile the two?
Thank you for that question. I do understand why there's a bit of confusion there. So the Jacobs report said, as you said, doesn't necessarily recommend triggers at this stage. However, we've suggested that an end date with triggers is a responsible position because we are aware that climate change may at some stage affect us. So we're okay with an open end date with triggers. However, not the 30 years, because your own expert opinions show that we shouldn't be affected in the next 30 years. And triggers doesn't have to be an environmental event. It can actually trigger the next stage of discussion. So that's in your report, you've got environmental retreat, which that is suggesting triggers without using the word triggers. So we're saying get rid of that whole section because you're talking about triggers, and that needs so much more discussion and research. But we could just end up with a trigger that triggers the next discussion if there is an environmental event that we can all agree on. Does that answer your question?
Can I add to that, maybe? Can I add to that? Is that okay? So I guess where we're coming from is we're trying to meet council in the middle. Okay, we can see your point of view, and we also want to find ground that everybody is comfortable with. So we firmly believe finite is not the right choice at this stage. By the same token, we acknowledge that there may in the future become environmental factors that simply can't be ignored. Hence a open-ended term with triggers or environmental impacts, whatever way you want to phrase it, meets in the middle. That's where we're coming from.
Oh, I've got so focused on triggers now, I've forgotten where I was at. Can you come back to me, Sam? Sorry, I need to...
I just wanted to clarify, just in the conclusions.
Sure.
It says you support option 2 for the consultation, and then we go to point C, which says an extra licence term in 5.4, which would be an option D, so open term with triggers.
Yes.
If that was in the current consultation, document that we have in front of us. Would that suffice to you to
Okay.
approve consultation?
Well, option 2 of the consultation report that you're looking at today is to not accept it. So we're asking that you don't accept the current proposal in front of you today. And then the third point then was additional to that on the term options that are being looked at, which is within the consultation report, that you could add in an option D, open-ended, with
So
triggers.
if we put option D into the consultation document, that still would not suffice.
Oh, sorry, I see your question now. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Thanks for your question. I just think in my speech we did list that there's so many issues. It's not just the ones you've listed here, but there's so many ongoing issues. Well, not ongoing, they could be resolved. That we need more time than your recommended consultation of 5 weeks. We're not going to be able to have an open conversation about all the issues that are outstanding. So I think if you just add that in then to the current proposal, it's still not going to be enough.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, mine was pretty much, these guys have covered it. I just wanted to clarify what you were seeking today. So you are wanting an extended amount of time. You're wanting these areas addressed, which are the finite term removed. You're wanting to reduce, you're wanting to go back to high significance from moderate. You're also wanting to change the 3-month time frame for the arrears, which would be going to the 6 to 12 months or an independent case-by-case payment agreement between lessees and the lessor. Is that correct? So just want to clarify if that's what you're seeking today. There's a lot in this document and it's really hard to get your head around all of the different components. Is there anything that I've left out?
No, I think that's a very good summary. The one thing I think is also important is giving us all a chance to address your concerns of duty of care. So that seems to be your main concern in relation to our term that you grant. And we haven't really had an open conversation about the remaining issues regarding your duty of care.
The duty of care from council to yourselves?
Yes. Such as, I think there's a few in there, but fire risk, which we're reviewing, and the concern about the stop bank, which we've contacted ECAN about, but there's others as well. It's in your publicly excluded meeting of all your remaining concerns.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Thank you for your comments. I guess my question is a follow-up from Elizabeth, and it's looking at the question of those that are in arrears. And I'm starting to get confused. When we collect actually hut fees and other charges that are applicable to hut fees, are you saying that we cannot collect those under the Reserves Act 1977? You're not liable to pay any of those fees, your rates and arrears, because the Crown own the land and council administer it?
Will I go ahead?
Is that what I'm trying to understand?
Yeah, no, we're not talking about the collection of arrears with regards to the Reserves Act or any other legislation. We absolutely acknowledge council are well within their right to collect those arrears. We recently had a community meeting to encourage people to pay what they need to pay, or at least to make contact with council to make an arrangement to pay. No, 100%, we acknowledge those arrears need to be collected. What we're asking for is that you give them the maximum time possible, or to possibly come to some one-on-one arrangement with people to make it.
And my other question is, I guess it's around the renewal of the licence that has continuously been rolled over since 2015. So my understanding is there's been no comprehensive deed of licence since 2015, and it's just been rolled over and rolled over and rolled over. Now we're 10 years into a process here, and I'm just conscious of what the expenditure was just for last year with regards to this particular process. And I just wonder, with regards to continuation of this process without actually coming to some clear conclusions so all hut owners know their responsibility in regards to the deed of licence. How do you see this coming to an end if you're continually, seemingly asking or wanting to extend, and we've already, in the recommendation, extend the rollover for another year, to continually extend this deed of licence, giving nobody any certainty with regards to what your responsibilities are under that deed of licence?
Yep, so we also feel the pain of the rollovers. We as a community don't want this to go on any longer than needs to. We want to find a solution, but it has to be a well-informed, factual, lawful solution. And we actually believe there is a win-win here for everyone if we can just properly look through each of the issues and resolve what needs to be resolved. 100%, we want clarity just as much as you do. We don't want rollovers, but the decision needs to be the right one.
Sorry, can I just add to that as well? For us, it's all about justifying the term. Once we get past the term, we can quickly just go through anything that's left over regarding the deed of licence. There's not going to be a huge pushback on those terms, on the extra terms, but the term of the licence needs to be justified, and because you haven't legally justified your current decision in the report at the moment, we have to push back. We've got no choice. We've got to stick with the law and what is fair and what is right, and that's why you're getting pushback. It's basically the term.
Thank you both for presenting today. And just confirming, you've presented in Susan Rogers' spot and you've presented in Graham Evans' spot, so that concludes the public presentation. So that's great. No, thank you for that. Councillors, we will now move. I just want to mark the passing of Bill Woods, previous Mayor of Selwyn, and Jens Christensen, a previous councillor here for us, and both members in their own local communities have contributed a lot. So we're going to stand for a minute's silence. I'm then going to adjourn the meeting and just allow a 15-minute break, and people can stretch their legs. And we've been in this room now for a while, absorbing the information that's been given to us, and then we'll come back, and the first item that will be on the agenda at that point will be the Upper Selwyn Huts paper. So if I could ask you to stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. So we'll adjourn this afternoon's council meeting. 15 minutes. That'll take us through till 2:35, and we'll reconvene. So yeah, please take a break. And if those visitors that are here need to use the bathrooms or anything, they're just down further in the toilet, down the hallway, and feel free to stretch your legs. Thank you. So welcome back to everyone. We will continue now with the Upper Selwyn Huts licence consultation proposal paper. Councillors, this is on page 193 of today's agenda, and welcome to the team at the front of the room. Denise.
Mr. Mayor, can I just highlight that
Deborah.
I've got an amendment that I want to propose to the recommendation, please.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
I've pre-circulated it, so all councillors are aware of what that amendment is, and I'm quite happy to have it tabled with regards to everybody sharing what the recommendation is.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. We'll come to those decisions and anything that might need to be added or taken away from the report based on things you've heard and what we're about to hear. So we'll hear from Denise and the team down the end. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, councillors and members of the public. I'm here today to speak to the Upper Selwyn Huts licence and consultation report. I apologise that Tim Harris is still away on leave and unable to be here today. I assure you that all of Council's executive leadership team and a large number of staff are very familiar with the situation affecting Upper Selwyn Huts and the associated complexity, and we do understand the importance to Upper Selwyn Hut licence holders and tenants of the matter before us. Before I hand over for questions and discussion, I want to draw councillors' attention to the key points in the report in front of you, and to also use the opportunity to address some of the questions and comments that we have received between issuing the report and today. Firstly, I'll start with the key points from the report. The report recommends a 12-month rollover of the current licence, and to allow us sufficient time to undertake a consultation process that will target Upper Selwyn Hut licence holders and prepare the revised terms and conditions, as well as communicate with the affected current and potential licence holders. That is the intent. This rollover is based on the previous terms and conditions. We're not anticipating introducing new terms and conditions at this point in time. And that will be available to all current licence holders. The report proposes that we take a 3-month period to respond to licence holders that currently have debt arrears. The current licence document itself actually has a shorter period of time, and we think we need a longer time frame. The consultation process itself, while there has been a lot of engagement, and that was commented on earlier on, particularly in terms of the piece of work that Tim Harris led, what this report proposes is actually to formally enter into a consultation process. This has not occurred to date, and that will allow a consultation process, and will provide opportunities for the Upper Selwyn Hut licence holders and tenants to give feedback. That consultation process will include options for licence timeframes. It proposes a new deed of licence with a clause that allows council to exit the licence in the event of serious environmental events, and we want to hear from the community in that regard. Feedback is also invited on the council's proposed bond requirements. That's intended to ensure that the land is restored at the end of the term, and we seek community feedback on that. Additionally, the report proposes structured implementation of conditions inspections related to the buildings, and we want to hear feedback around that in terms of whether or not there are some particular matters that need to be drawn to our attention. In terms of responses to some of the questions and comments that we've received in the intervening period, I'm going to ask my colleague Dom to talk to you specifically about the level of significance and the change and the use of the term finite. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that we do intend to target the Upper Selwyn Hut licence holder and tenants in this consultation process. And we have considered, as I hope you've seen in the report and the information around that we have incorporated the likes of a range of drop-in sessions, etc., and we're making them available specifically for the Upper Selwyn Hut licence holders and tenants. As a comment has been made about the statement in the report regarding the history of the huts. This statement, just for your information, was copied directly from a report to Council in July 2024, and we apologise if this missed some details of the actual history, and this is noted. A couple of inquiries came through that corrected the statement that Council owns the land. We acknowledge that. This was a typographical error. The Crown owns the land. Council is required to manage and administer it on its behalf. We apologise for that mistake. So now I'll invite Dom to speak to you about the matter of the level of significance and the use of the term finite.
Kia ora. So I'll start by touching on the commentary around significance, and I think important for us to note that we acknowledge there have been some discrepancies in use of language over what is now almost a decade of engagement with the community. Beg your pardon. Thanks, Denise. Is that better? Brilliant. So we acknowledge that there have been different uses of language over the last decade. We also acknowledge that for this community, this is an important and significant decision. And that is consistent with the message that Tim gave at a meeting in August last year. What we have done is take an opportunity to reset and assess, and under our significant engagement policy, understand what this is for the district. Now, that does not undo the acknowledgement of significance for this community, but taken as a whole, we do not believe this meets the standard beyond moderate for under our policy. However, I do want to be really clear that in taking into consideration the community, the importance of this to this community, the consultation process that has been proposed in this paper is an SCP-like engagement and consultation specifically with the residents and licence holders up at the community, and in particular a 5-week period is beyond what would be required if this was an SCP. Julie, did you have anything to add on that? And then I think we will shift now to, beg your pardon, to the comments around the term. Look, we haven't had an opportunity to provide a formal written response since receiving the legal opinion this morning. We are happy to do that in due course. However, we do believe that it is Council's right to determine the term of this licence, and we think that there are some inaccuracies in the legal opinion provided where where it's been suggested that only some of the provisions of the Reserved Act should apply in this circumstance. Our view is there is no inconsistency between the two pieces of legislation that have been discussed today, and therefore they should both apply in their entirety. And on that basis, we've been guided and continue to recommend the licence terms as set out in our proposed consultation process.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, and I'm sure there are a few questions. I just want to start off with that move around the classification of moderate or high significance. And just for clarity, we're saying that it's 5 weeks of direct targeted consultation, which sits above the threshold, even if it was of high significance. Is there any other difference in our approach or the way that we would be doing things for the community if it was classified as high compared to moderate, and hence what other than it meeting what the policy says, what's the motivation for having it as moderate and not high when it's previously been high?
I'll initially respond and then I'll invite Julie to speak to that. I guess one of the points we want to make is that we understand that whatever the level of significance is given, we recognise that there will be some parties for whom whatever the matter is in front of them is incredibly important. There are other factors that need to be considered in determining whether it is significant in terms of the levels that need to be factored in, and that's what Dom explained. What we I may not have been clear in my initial comments around the consultation process is that we have taken on board the feedback that has been given to us about the types of engagement and approaches that have been received positively from the community, and we have built that in to the consultation process that we are proposing. And as you pointed out, we've extended the time frame. Julie, you might want to add some comments.
The only comment I kind of wanted to add there, Sam, was direct to your question as to is there anything we are not doing by making this moderate instead of high on a district-wide basis for the community engagement. There is nothing that we aren't doing that we would otherwise do if we had overclassified this as high. What we won't be doing is special consultative procedure for the entire district, so going out and doing drop-in sessions, town halls for every member of the district. We are focusing that in on those parties who are affected or are direct stakeholders.
Thank you. And can you just provide clarity to the 33 years and how the report kind of has limits on that final time, whether it's 10 plus 10 plus 10 or 30, and that number sits in there. With what was received today, is there reason to think that there is no need to have that limit, or do you still believe that your advice to us needs to be 33 years is a limit, and therefore anything we consider needs to fit within that time frame?
So my advice remains that it needs to fit within that time frame without getting down into statutory interpretation. We have two acts here. The first act doesn't set a time limit, therefore that's the power you're giving it under. The second act is more specific and it does set a time limit, therefore legislative, you are required to try to give effect to both. So we are granting it under the first act, but the time frame in the second act, in our opinion, in our legal opinion, does still apply.
Okay. And today we've heard about any new council not being bound by what a previous council has decided. So, and specifically today was focused on that 2019 decision. If we choose a 10 plus 10 plus 10 or something that's longer than the length that this council is around to determine what happens next, is there anything that inhibits or stops a future conversation in 20 years' time from this coming back, just because through this process we might set something beyond 3 years but less than infinite?
In short, no. You can't bind a future council, and therefore that will be a decision for them to make at the time.
Cool, thank you. Elizabeth.
I was after some clarity. So you've told us that with the 5 weeks of direct targeted engagement that they're going to have that, but there's not an indication of what that looks like to understand that. And it comes in with also the choice of the level of significance. in terms of the significance, it's obviously incredibly high for this community. It might not trigger to the wider community, as you say, in your minds, but given that this has been coined managed retreat, I would say it still does have a lot of bearing and precedence for the wider community, because ultimately this is the reason that we're looking at this today. We're using triggers, therefore it's managed retreat, so it's still of high value. The 5 weeks direct targeted engagement is a very rushed time frame to ascertain all the things that you need to do, which is, I know, just correct me if I'm wrong, in that 5 weeks you're wanting to go through the deed of license and clarify what isn't going to be in there, so that both parties make an agreement on that. You're also looking at resolving the issues that are related to today's decisions, and the particularly around the triggers. So triggers are in themselves, and it's been raised already by the community, that's already something that requires an additional amount of research, which is going to take quite a lot of consulting and bringing in experts in that field to reach those. The key thing around the triggers is that whatever triggers we set now for this community need to apply across the whole district, because any trigger needs to be a crossover and a parallel for everybody. So it's the same thing. This is significant to the whole community here. We're setting a precedence for every emergency management situation across Selwyn. Do you think that 5 weeks is going to be long enough to be able to bring that into consideration? And I may come back to another question after you've answered that.
I'll do an initial response and see if my colleagues want to add anything. We think it's important to go into a formal consultation process. There has been a level of engagement. We think there's value in a formal consultation process. We are looking at needing to move into the extension for 12 months of the licence deed. So there is some pace at which we are needing to act that doesn't relate directly to the consultation process, but it is a contributory aspect. We do recognise, for example, that that managing and dealing with the debt arrears is bigger than a 5-week period, and that's why we have indicated that we expect that we can effect a suggested resolution that we could bring back to council within that period. And we also will be reporting back to council in September, and that report may well, we expect, identifies further areas where we might focus some of our engagement going forward outside of the formal consultation process. We think that a targeted and concentrated consultation period gives us an opportunity to capture the sort of information and feedback we need to give ourselves sufficient time to prepare the final terms and conditions that will take effect from the 1st of July 2026.
Can you just quantify exactly what we're wanting to do? Are we wanting to, in that 5 weeks, determine the triggers and determine all aspects of the deed of licence? And is there any other additional stuff that you want to determine? And do you also are going to be working with all the stakeholders in that 5 weeks, or are you utilising any of those decisions within the 12-month period?
I'll invite my colleagues from comms to make a comment around that. The 5 weeks is intended to capture the feedback from the community, and that's the focus, is to get make a concentrated effort to gather all of the feedback and all of the issues that we need to consider. And most of them sit around the terms of the licence and the time period associated with the licence, and that is going to be our focus. We do expect that there will be other matters that get raised that potentially require further engagement, further discussions, and we anticipate that that can happen outside of the consultation process and may well be the things that staff put up in the recommendations to council in September. But I'll just turn to Nisha to see whether or not there's anything you would want to add, or Sarah, you'd like to add to that.
I don't think so. I think that within the consultation period, we are going to get different views, and we're allowing for that in terms of the questions. And so in terms of what specific information are we wanting, there will be questions that will be asked. But I guess it will be that's part of the process, is to find out what additional information we need to find out.
Is the community involved in the decisions around the triggers?
The community is involved in the consultation process to give us their feedback about the things that matter really and that are really important to them, so that we make sure that we do consider those in the preparation of advice, the areas that we research and investigate, and the recommendations that go back to council.
Will the wider community, because you've got stakeholders, but it's not clear who those additional stakeholders are outside of mana whenua and Department of Conservation, etc. Yeah, interested communities, it says. So the interested communities, who are those interested communities, and given the triggers will need to set a precedence for the entire district, who are those interested parties, and will the wider community get to speak to that, or are we going to wait for the next long-term plan?
Sorry, just a point of order on that. The triggers and the discussion doesn't have to set precedent, and we haven't had any information on whether that does or not. So I don't think we can assert that that is the case. So I understand what your question is, but as the discussion here, we just need to make sure that we're not assuming things are going to happen, and perhaps we could have some advice from the legal staff rather than saying this does set those triggers. I know that was part of your earlier question.
It was a question.
Elizabeth.
Yep.
I will hand it over to legal, but also Sarah from Comms may want to make a comment. But the intent is to make this. There is opportunity for the broader Selwyn community to provide feedback, but that doesn't preclude us from a targeted consultation with the Upper Selwyn Hut licence holders and tenants, and a couple of those key partners would include Environment Canterbury and Te Taumutu Runanga and Ngāi Tuahuriri potentially in that space. But Sarah, would you like to comment, and then I'll hand it over to legal.
So part of the purpose of running a public consultation is that any group that we haven't necessarily considered as an interested party is able to put their views forward. So while we know of interested parties that Denise has mentioned there, it also makes sure that any other group that we haven't considered also is given a fair and reasonable opportunity to put forward their views.
Did you want me to comment on the precedent?
Just the precedent piece. But
sure.
Yeah, is it location specific? Is everything that we're setting up here district wide?
So I think what we come back to is what we've discussed of one council cannot bind another. So when new facts come forward to a new council, they will be free to make new decisions subject to contracts that have been entered into and those other types of arrangements. But I don't personally have the view that from a legal perspective this is a precedent setting arrangement, and these sorts of things need to be determined on the facts as each particular issue comes to council or councils of the future.
Will I get to speak to once we've moved through?
Yeah, I think if we use this time now for some of the questions, create understanding, and then if people have got particular things, we'll move forward. Then Deborah's got amendment to that, and then we'll have some debates after we deal with this kind of inquisitive space. So if we can just hold off on the moving and seconding and amendments until we get through this part of it, Elizabeth. So there'll be a chance to come back. Anyone who's got some questions, this isn't your one and only chance. You get a chance to come back and say some things later in the meeting.
Yep. Can I raise just quickly the inspections of the buildings? Is this something in which we've got further questions to ask from what was proposed to the community prior in the previous consultation? And the consultation, I'm not clear around how this consultation's going to be going forward, because my understanding was that we were going to continue with the consultation process that had worked previously with the guy Chris, I can't remember who was with Jacobs, I think. Will we be looking at that consultation or something slightly different?
There's a couple of issues, questions that you raised. The first one I'll talk about is inspection, and the second one is what type of engagement. So in terms of the inspections report, and and I'm mindful that we did have, and I could have made mention of it before, we have had a couple of people who thought that the inspection checklist was going to be attached to the report. And my apologies if there was that expectation. What we had intended to say in the report was that the proposed inspection checklist would be attached to the consultation document, so that the community is really clear what it is that council is proposing to do. And that is the same inspections checklist that was tabled at a public meeting and included in the agenda of a public meeting of council in July 2024. I just don't have that available to me at the moment. The second bit was we are currently in conversations, active conversations with members of both the internal team and some of our external colleagues who have been involved with the previous engagement to see if to try and ensure a level of continuity so that it's not a completely different experience.
Just one question from me. One of the requests that we heard earlier was around including a D in the questions under 5.4. She's trying to find around no finite period and environmental triggers. How difficult would it be to insert that?
I won't. I'll leave someone else to comment on the environmental triggers. In terms of the finite period, that goes to, does the Reserve Act apply or not? So our position continues to be that the Reserve Act 33-year limit applies. Irrespective of that, even if it were not to apply, council would still have to have good justification for considering that a no finite period is actually a justifiable good decision under all our normal Local Government Act principle making, general principles on decision making.
Cool. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That was one of my questions, so that one's done. My other question was actually just in response to Councillor Munt's query around triggers and whether or not we're writing triggers for the entire district or if we're writing triggers for this particular parcel of land or this area. And my understanding is we're doing it for this area because we have these obligations for this particular area that are different than obligations that are where the land's owned by others. And so, or managed by others. And I just wanted to know from a legal perspective, like, why would we be treating this particular area and writing triggers for this area that don't apply across the district?
Yeah, thank you, Megan, and agree that the two are different and we're treating them differently because this is council granting a licence to others to occupy an area of land. That means we owe those people that occupy that land a duty of care. And if we consider that their health and safety requires us to apply another layer of protection, then that's appropriate for us to do so. And that's why it's different to a member of the public who may own the land underneath and makes their decisions for themselves.
I guess this is a little on the sort of on that Reserves Act in the 33 years, and we don't have to attach the word finite to that.
No, that's a really good point, is I think, and it goes to the point of could it be reconsidered? If we say the term was 20 years down the track, could it be reconsidered? It can come back to a council and a new council in 33 years sitting in your seat could have the same decision before them to make that decision. It's not finite in the extent of we cannot go through this process ever again.
And I just want to understand a little bit about the arrears. And so I'm interested in how many licence holders are in arrears and what is the dollar figure associated to that?
I will hand to my finance colleagues to comment, but I do know from some earlier communication, so that some weeks ago now, that there were 18 licence holders involved, and I think a level of debt in the vicinity of 50,000. But I'll just look to my colleague Becca, or Alison. Sorry. Just if you want to comment around that.
Really, Janice, I'm just adding to what you've said. There are circa 18, and the quantum of the debt is circa 50,000 at this point in time. What we will do is break that down at component level, whether that is licence or rates related. But we won't be going into the individual details of where that sits, because that would be breaching a person's privacy.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking for individual, it's just a round figure so that I could try and ascertain the financial implications for the people over that time.
Okay, so to move it forward then, if we could have a mover and seconder for what's here, noting that there's amendments that people might want to put in that might change, but it'll just help us have some structure to the next part of the conversation. So is there a mover and a seconder for the report? Move Malcolm, seconded Shane. Okay, that helps. And Deborah, you've got
I've got an amendment.
an amendment. Yeah, do you want to talk to that?
I do, thank you. I just got to find it on my phone first, otherwise I can't draw it up on Diligent. Right. I'm actually proposing to insert a new E. And the wording of E will be for transparency of financial information. For transparency of financial information, the hut owners be provided with a copy of their current year ending 30th of June 2025 licence fees and any proposed discounts, if any. Rates adjusted to the property value similar to the rating examples given in our 10-year annual plan, and proposed WSCCO charges over the 10-year period for the district-wide rates as shown in the WSCCO consultation document 2025, explaining how these charges will be collected. I want a new F inserted, that the responsibility of any renewal costs for lateral connections for water and wastewater to service each hut be recoverable by hut fees as proposed in the council decision March 2024. By inserting those two new clauses, we have F becomes G, and I've actually made E H, because if you actually read the recommendation itself, the consultation issue should actually be at the end of, I'm trying to find it, sorry, that E becomes H, because E actually says endorse the consultation process and activity in Appendix 1. The consultation questions are in Section 5 of this report. That, to me, should be at the end of the report with regards to those particular clauses, emphasising that this is consultation. And I want to explain the reasons why I've introduced those two pieces of transparency that are discussed in the report. It's no news that I've highlighted to my fellow councillors since this came out that I have shared my questions, and I wish to table those questions from this report. The reason? To date, it is my understanding a comprehensive deed of licence for the Upper Selwyn Huts has been rolled over since 2015. Ongoing costs just for the year of 2024-25 are $254,716. And as a matter of urgency to manage ongoing costs in this proposed further round of consultation, thank you, for the consultation for the Upper Selwyn Huts deed of licence renewal, all financial information needs to be provided for consideration in one go to avoid a continued piecemeal approach. To date, I suspect the general rate collected has financed this process and will continue to do so. Therefore, it is important to settle this issue at reasonable cost, enabling in a September report to Council that this new deed of licence contains clear instructions for hut owners to follow. So my clauses actually make sure that there is more transparency around the financial implications going forward for the huts, and not for them to necessarily have to wait until we come to the 26-27 annual report or plan, because this information should be able to be drawn out, no different than how we do it for a rating for any other rates that we actually have in our annual plan. And hopefully I'll have a seconder for that.
Thanks, Deborah. Is there a seconder for that to be included? Grant? Yep, there's a seconder, Councillor Miller. And then if anyone has got any comments or concerns or matters they'd like to raise, particularly to the amendment, not to the overall motion that's there, if we could discuss that now. And I just ask the staff, what does adding this, how does it affect the overall intent of what is already in the paper? Sharon.
Yeah, actually I'm going to look to Alison, because a lot of this is around financial. Do you want to share your thoughts first, and I'll then give my advice?
So Deborah and I have spoken quite a lot about this matter. So in principle, I'm comfortable with what is on screen, because that's the conversation that we've had. Noting that some of this detail goes back a number of years, but I'm comfortable that we can pull this together with Becca and Miller and the team to break that down, so we've got the clarity around what has happened in the past, where are the arrears, what are we proposing now, and what those charges would look like once the charges start coming through from the Water Services CCO.
But in terms of adding that to today and with regards to the consultation, we probably won't be able to pull that information, which will then push timeframes out. And I guess, and I'm looking to my legal team, but we know that the current deed of licence expires on the 29th or 30th of June this year, and that we have some legal requirements to extend that. So the risk would be is that if we can't pull that information together before that changes the outcome of this, we need to be able to make sure that legally we roll over the licence for another year. Is that correct?
That's correct. We could potentially look to do further on an engagement basis, and we will be doing an ongoing engagement with the community, look to provide this sort of information in that type of process. But not if we were to leave it out, put it in today's consultation, we would be unlikely to be able to extend the licences for the 12 months, which is the purpose of this decision.
So just for clarity there, you're saying if we include this today, it compromises the ability for us to extend the licences. So your advice is to not include this. Okay, but
Yes.
You're saying that there is a way that this can be done, just not through this process as amended today.
And it includes, there are some time constraints that we would face pulling that information together that would impact upon our ability to issue that information prior to progressing into the extension of the extension for 1 year, is my understanding, and Alison can correct me if I'm wrong, but we can most definitely look to do that. And I would suggest that perhaps even in the report that we present back to Council in September, we would be able to shed a lot of information in that regard. But Alison, you can speak to that specifically.
Sorry, I'll chip in here. What we're actually saying is that it's really important to be able to roll over the DEDA licence for a year. I think we're clear that the consultation that we committed to is not going to stop, and actually as we do the consultation, bring back more reports over that year, we can make sure that all the information that Deborah has asked for is wrapped up, and that will continue to be included. But we must make sure that we don't lose the opportunity to do a rollover of licence from the 30th of June. So we're not saying we're not going to provide the information, we're not going to bring it forward, but we must do it in a way that enables us to still have a rollover for a 12-month period, knowing that the deed of licence expires on the 30th of June 2025.
Yeah, I see these as two separate. So are we going to, D, I think we've ascertained that we can do D without having to put that in here, and E is a completely separate decision. So I hope that we'll take them separately.
So they've been moved together. They can be voted on separately, but at the moment the amendments for both of them to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that with the responsibility of the renewal costs for the lateral connections for water, well, we haven't ascertained what those are right now. And in terms of being recoverable by the hut fees, I think we actually need to first evaluate what D comes to, so everybody is clear and efficient on what the costs are to these people. Having met with some of the community yesterday about their arrears, well aware that there are people down there on benefits that are absolutely struggling. That's why we've got 18 people in arrears already. And I think, obviously we've got a letter where one person's not, but there are many vulnerable people down there. We've got the statistics to show that they're vulnerable in every possible sense of the word. I think it would be crazy to make that decision today without the full information and knowing that these community that we're enabling rather than creating more difficult problems.
Sophie?
Yeah, my query was actually around E as well, but for a different reason, more around with the WSCCO coming by, we don't actually have, I don't think we've probably got the information to provide that, like we can't quantify that right now, I don't think. And you've raised that in the email that you've sent round to councillors, that is this, is that decision from March 2024 still the case given the establishment of WSCCO for water and wastewater services? So without being able to answer that, I'm not sure that we can resolve that we provide the information. So,
Grant?
My purpose in seconding the amendment was to ensure that the hut owners had clear transparency around the costs they're likely to incur. What I've heard in the responses from the staff is that those two amendments will be collected through the consultation process and delivered. All I'm concerned about is that it is captured as part of this process. So I'm happy for it not to be included, as long as the assurance is at this meeting that it will be captured in the consultation process.
Yeah, the intent is, as I understand it, and Alison can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we intend to stick as close as possible to the existing and historic licence fee as part of this rollover. The opportunity that is in front of us is to ensure that there is absolute transparency around all of the costs, and that council is comfortable with what the licence fee covers and doesn't cover as we move into the process that will commence on the 1st of July 2026. So that's absolutely our intention, but we're just not in a position to present it as part of, before we roll over the existing fees and charges, existing licence fee. But Alison, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's correct, Denise. So that is intention, is to stick as close as possible to where we are at just now, but it's just breaking that down to see what does this relate to. So the licence fee, there are a few line items that are available on the website, so it's just been very clear that those are still a true reflection of what the licence fee relates to.
I have, but is it when's the appropriate time to? No,
No, I'll wait.
So, yeah, you get it right for reply, Deborah.
Thank you. As Grant has said, it's important that when we go out to consultation, with regards to this 5-week consultation, that we have financial information that we must have available with regards to what we're currently charging the hut owners as a hut fee. We must know what they're being charged as a rate. And we had a consultation document presented through the WSCCO, and it had a 10-year budget. And in that 10-year budget, for a targeted rate, it had the information now of the cost, proposed costs going forward. Now, all I'm asking for is for full transparency, is those costs be added up as a proposal to go out for consultation, because currently what the huts are paying in licence fees isn't going to stay that value if you actually look at the 14.5% rate increase that we're going to have to add on. If we go to if the wastewater and water is separated out and managed under a WSCCO, they will have their own charges separate, but they must be able to pay those charges or find out how the WSCCO can claim those charges, and there's an uncertainty there, I will agree. But this is being transparent. And in this report, it is noted that the laterals will be paid by the council. By the hut owners. It's actually in the report itself. I'm just highlighting that comment and putting it actually in the resolution. And the reason why I want it in the resolution or the recommendation is it's the points in the recommendation that matter ahead of the information in the body of the report. And that's why I have introduced them as separate for transparency. And I'd be quite surprised if we don't have a desktop availability to actually supply that data. And with regards to the laterals, we don't know what they're going to cost, admittedly. But it was agreed at that date that the laterals servicing the properties would be paid for by the hut owners as their responsibility. We're not talking about the pipeline. We're talking about the laterals that actually connect from the sewage system through to their huts. So if we don't do this, what's going to end up happening, I'm really, really afraid, is that we will get to a situation where we haven't disclosed all the financial information to them. And therefore we have to extend the consultation process, or when we come to the 26-27 plan or annual plan. Once again, we haven't disclosed all the information. Every time since 2015, this process has cost our ratepayers, because I assume that it's not been charged to the huts, it's been charged to the general rate. So everybody in Selwyn is picking up this externality cost, and the longer we drag it on, giving ourselves loopholes and outs that can be challenged, the more this is actually going to cost the general rate across our district. And that's my concern. I want to see this going forward. I want clarity. I do not want another 10 years of what has actually happened with regards to the decision-making process around the renewal of the hut's deed. So that's why this is important to me to be in here now, to go out as part of the consultation package. It's nothing new, it's actually included in the report. I'm just highlighting it as a recommendation so it doesn't come back to us that, oh, we weren't aware of this.
Thank you, Deborah. So, Council, we've heard that if we approve D, it compromises the timelines, and E is almost predetermination of what the consultation outcomes is going to be over the next 12 months, and so would warn against us supporting that as well. But we know that the intent, as Deborah has raised and Sharon has confirmed, is for this stuff to happen, just not to be included here. I'll let you make your own decisions on whether you include D and E in today's decision. So it's been moved by Deborah and seconded by Grant. All those in favour of the amendment being added, raise your hands. 1, 2. Are those against, raise your hands. Declare it lost. Sure. Those in favour of it being added were Councillor, raise your hand, it was Councillor Hassan and Glidden. And those against, please raise your hand. And that can be noted down as, if you want to name them, but it's everyone else. Great. So we move now to the original recommendation that was there, and if anyone has got views and things that they'd like to share on this, feel free to come back into the conversation now. And I note that Councillor Miller, you had your light on before, and Shane as well, both had things to say, so feel free to come back in. Shane, you're in.
Yeah, thanks. I really feel for the folks out there. We've gone and made a heck of a word soup out of this. You came up with some pretty clear intent as to what you wanted around the level of significance and consultation. I'm not a lawyer or anybody. I'm pretty simple, so I'll keep it simple. From what I've seen, all intentions of council have been to act since we've had another go at this and had another look at it, to act with integrity towards the people of you folks, all of you, in the best interests of the district somehow. I think what you've got on you is a fair representation and a good deal. What we've discussed as making it high significance potentially is what is understood as being of high significance, endorsed in floodings of high significance to the people that live in the houses there. The roads of a high significance in Southbridge as is flooding. And high significance from a council perspective is to take this to the district. And if you want it, we've got a real risk of this going sideways for it. Actually, if you're raising it to the level of high significance that you want, counts the district to have a good look at this and go, it's a consultation, you may, in fact, have a different outcome. I'm supportive of supporting the direction of council and Tim's good work and the consultation that's happened so far, and the best intent for this to be open to continue. Whether it's words that need to be changed or whether it's what you feel is important to your communities to continue to be involved in, I'm confident that we have the CEO and her team and the legal experts, and you have too, to include what you want moving forward. Again, it's a good deal, and I think in all seriousness, it's probably the best of what we can do at this point, so I'm in support of the recommendation. Thank you.
I just wanted to you have stated it, but I just want reassurance that you feel confident that the substantive document from Claire Lenihan can be accommodated. There's no need for us to lie on the table for you to seek further legal advice, or
no. And I think if I put it really clearly, is I don't think either way, whether we accept the opinion or we don't accept the opinion, I don't think it changes the councillor recommendations, because we either set the opinion and you're bound at 33 years, or we don't accept the opinion and the council still has wide discretion, which was Claire's own advice. Our recommendation then would be almost all leases and licences have a term. It would be, we don't believe, using good LGA and Reserve Act decision-making principles, it would be open to you to make a decision, even under discretion, to put an infinite term on a licence.
Okay. My second point is certainty. I think the residents of Upper Selwyn Huts deserve certainty. This has gone on for far too long, and it's an extremely nervous period because it's an unknown outcome, and the natural tendency is to want to defer that because it's an uncertain outcome. But you can't keep deferring it. I think, we have to come to a conclusion, and ultimately we're asking ourselves the question, is 5 weeks long enough for the Upper Selwyn Huts community to have a consultation and provide meaningful feedback to us as a council? I would suggest that is yes, because it focuses the attention on a very concentrated area of expertise. I wanted to repeat what Shane said because that was my opinion. I think this focus on significant versus moderate, I think there's a significant risk for you as a community to do that, because at the moment with moderate consultation it's targeted to the community of Upper Selwyn Huts. We get very strong direct feedback from that affected group. The risk is if you expand this to the whole of Selwyn, you put your fate into someone else's hands. And I can hear where you're coming from, but I don't think it's the solution. That'll be, that's my personal opinion. I think Shane, the same as you, that it's better to stay at moderate for that reason. I'm very firmly of the view that I have, and I feel some ways a bit aggrieved around the debt arrears. Council's gone into this in a good faith basis, and it really concerns me that nearly 20% of the Upper Selwyn Huts are defaulted on their fees or charges. What does that say to us about this community's ability to be a sustainable community into the future if you can't keep your fees up to date and act in good faith? So I absolutely support 3 months. If you want, this is a good faith process. Everyone needs to be up to date, ready to go, best dressed for this opportunity. There's no second chances here. If you're not prepared to be ready to go and commit to this process, you miss out. And I know that's hard-nosed, but there's a good faith requirement here, and I think it needs to be done. The second or third thing that I heard particularly was around wanting another clause inserted around, let's say, unlimited tenure. Let's be honest, that will be put into the document by the consultation by the Upper Selwyn Huts residents. So we will definitely hear that clause in the feedback to us as councillors, whether it's written in there by us as a council or whether it's written in by the Upper Selwyn Huts community on the other, it will be there. So I think that's a bit of a red herring. I'm in a position where I'm reasonably confident for us to move forward. I think it's not helpful to defer, and I supported Deborah's earlier context that we must absolutely ensure that we do make full financial disclosure through this process to the residents that enables them to make informed decisions about their future. And I think that's it's not helpful to defer it, and I think the residents deserve nothing less than some sort of form or finality through this process rather than it going on for another 12 months or 18 months or whatever it might be, and being able to get on with their lives and live in a happy and sustainable way.
Yeah. Thank you very much to everybody, because I don't think there's a single person in this room who hasn't contributed in some way, probably multiple times over more than a decade, to be honest, for the most part. Definitely hear the message that people don't want a finite term, but also hear the message that that's what the Reserves Act requires, at least in terms of the 33 years part. What we definitely need is clarity, and the trouble is every time we come back with this, we hear some of the same thing with slightly different nuances, and it just keeps on going, and we end up with anything but clarity for anybody. And I agree with my colleagues that if this went out to the entire district, you might be surprised how many people would just like this to go away. It does cost the entire district a lot of money just having this consultation back again and again. And that doesn't mean that people don't sympathise with people who want to stay in their homes. It just means that everybody would like to know what is happening, and then we can plan. And if it means that the Hut community stays for another 30 years, then that's great, because that means we can plan for things like the infrastructure, replacing those wastewater pipes, making sure that ECAN know that the stop bank needs to stay being supported and all that sort of thing. If it turns into a case of undefined triggers or waiting until things are urgent, then literally nobody can plan. It becomes the lack of clarity is something that we're all going to struggle with, and we have done, obviously, because we have to think very long term, and thinking in terms of waiting until there's an urgent need is pretty much the definition of short term, and then things go wrong. We do not want to end up with duty of care being proven to have been completely lacking by not establishing some form of clarity. Anyway, I think we need to just go through and do this. It's one of the things that I was really hoping that we could come with some sort of decision by the end of this triennium, and we're coming right up against the end of that. So let's just do it. And I am very glad that there are open-ended questions in here, because that's where the gold is when it comes to consultations. It's the qualitative data, not so much the quantitative. It's what people think and how they explain the reason why they've answered how they have. So have at it. Let us know what you think. Thank you.
I agree with the rolling over of the licences. I think that is something that needs to happen automatically for the next 12 months. I sympathise with people and their financial constraints that they're having there to pay their licence fees. And, you know, so I do start to wonder when we look at the figure, and it's hard not to have a breakdown of what that is per person. And it's a shame we couldn't have had that information separately. I understand that there is, you know, personal details that we can't publicly share, but you know, if we divide that up, there's an extra $230 on average a week for people to pay their licence fees. And so, you know, it's the time frame around that I have concerns with, and I would like to say that we would be acting pragmatically with people to do that, but it's pretty hard cut on the 3 months. And so, to be honest, I would be in support of extending that to a 6 months, which I think would give people a more open window to actually pay that off over some weeks. If we go to the consultation document, and, you know, if we're abiding by the Reserve Act, yes, it has to be 33 years as a maximum, but it doesn't have to have the wording finite, final, non-renewable. And to not see that option included in the consultation document, I guess, is frustrating, because we know that people are going to come back with this feedback, so why are we not including it in the first place? I agree that this is very significant for the Upper Selwyn Huts. This is people's homes and lives that we're talking about. But I do think it is best to keep it focused on Upper Selwyn Huts and not extend this to the wider district, because this is about you and your homes, not about everybody else. I support having full financial disclosure, and I think that's actually a bottom line that we should be doing. It's not something extra we should be working hard on, it's a bottom line of what we should be providing to people. Just with the consultation document, and I note that when it has a yes or no, it only has specify with yes. So I think that there should be specify under both yes and no, just so that we are capturing as much information from people as possible. It's great to see that there's no login and registration. I know that I ask for that every single time we have a consultation, and it just makes it easy for people to see. I am happy that you are going to deliver this information to every single house, so that we can target every single person. And I'll just touch back on the final. And this still sits with me from March last year, is around the Aqualink report, and that actually, I'm still not sold on the why. If we address the Aqualink report, the sea level rise wasn't as predicted. So I'm not still set on the why of why we're trying to remove people from their homes. I think that we need to do the best that we can through this process. So that's why I think there should be another option included with the terms that doesn't include the wording finite, final, or non-renewable. And I just wanted to address some of the triggers, actually, or environmental retreat. When we talk about destruction of road cutting off vehicle access and that it might be too costly to repair, I thought that we would have a level of service to have a road to that place anyway, as it is a reserve. So I can't see that that should be included there. You know, the other ones I think we can all understand. If we start to see significant flooding or damage to people's homes, I think that's totally different than providing a basic level of service of a road. So I guess there's a bit to be worked out through the consultation in that. But those are some of my thoughts. I would really like to see some amendments to the consultation document with some wording.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I'm quite disappointed that the council has given us very little time to look at this information before bringing it to such a big decision here. While you're going out for consultation doesn't seem like a big decision, this is actually a really massively significant decision for both us and for the community. And I feel quite disheartened that we as a council have not heeded the information that's gone before. Councillors should have had this in front of them with 14 days at a minimum to get through this information properly and efficiently before having to come to this decision making today. So that is a huge disappointment for me and also for the poor community who've only had a couple of days to read through this as well and then do a presentation. There's a lot in here. I would like to raise some amendments, but I want to go through this as questions first. So first of all, and some statements, the consultation, yes, we want it to be between the leasee and the leaseor. So any, when it comes down to the deed of licence, when it comes down to any commercial aspect that you would have out in the real world, those deed of licence conditions would be between a leasee and a leaseor. So I do hope that in the consultation going forward, when you've invited all the other stakeholders to, that they're not really going to be the ones setting the scene for what goes in the deed of licence. And I'd like some clarification if that is what's been anticipated. In terms of the finite term, again, it's been raised. It should be this should really be based on triggers because that's ultimately the reason for the finite term. So the finite term is not really necessary because the triggers already give that certainty. So I don't think the finite's a requirement because the finite becomes null and void. It's really about the environmental triggers anyway. Thirdly, the why we've reduced from high significance to moderate. Looking through our significance and engagement policy, I can't actually see anything, and I'd like some clarification where in the significance and engagement policy the things that have been raised today are actually apparent, because they weren't apparent to me. It's high significance to this community, so therefore we should be working with this community on that basis. And I didn't see in the significant engagement policy where it states that we have to go to the wider community and get consultation from everybody over something that's considered high. So I was wondering if you could show me where that was. Why are we recommending the 3-month time frame to pay arrears for a vulnerable community? Again, I will reiterate, we've got all the stats in front of us that have been given to us that this is our most vulnerable community in the entire Selwyn District Council. We should be looking at 6 to 12 months, but ultimately a case-by-case payment plan. So within that time frame, we're actually working the same as we do with people who are in rates arrears. We work with them individually, case-by-case scenario, and help assist them. We need to be an enabling community. A requirement time frame for the consultation, I think we need to be flexible in that, and the fact that as council, look how far along it's taken us to get to this point with consultation. You cannot simply put a short time frame on anything and expect to achieve everything you want to do. Sam's already raised in the private and the PX process that we've done in the past that we shouldn't be making a rushed decision based on the fact that we've got an election coming up. Absolutely crazy. This needs to be what's best for the community, not what's best for the current sitting councillors. In terms of the lateral connections for the water, wastewater, I'm not sure that's a decision that needs to be made today. That's going out into the consultation document, correct? And as far as I could see, that was going to be in the long-term plan anyway. Am I correct on that?
Sorry.
And I want to raise amendments as well.
We're not going to get into another full round of asking staff questions. So we did that for quite a long time earlier, and then we've moved on to now being able to think about the debate that's in front of us with the papers and an amendment that's been put. So if you've got an amendment, Elizabeth, then we can have that here. But there's been a lot of discussion, and we've already spent 3 hours today on this matter, and it's an important matter, so that's why we're giving it this time. But I'd like you to please move to any amendments that you've got to the recommendation that's in front of us, and then we can speak to those.
Sure, and that just really shows that we haven't been given the time that's required for this detail. The fact that I can't have my questions answered now. So let's go on to the amendments.
Well,
I've asked enough
Elizabeth,
questions.
you're welcome to your perspective, and thank you for bringing that to us. But this conversation has been going on for many months, and to assume that it's now just this afternoon that there's a chance to ask questions and have things answered is incorrect and doesn't pay tribute to the work that the staff have done that was acknowledged at the very beginning of this with Tim Harris's work and others
I've got
down at the Selwyn Huts.
333 pages on my agenda to read, Sam, for today. It's been a very big week. Right, a very big week, and we've got a lot of very pushed and rushed decisions.
So, 333 pages is not an over large agenda for a councillor to be across ahead of our council decision. So, everyone else around the table is managing this. I'd like you to please move on to the amendments that you've got for this paper, and then we can think about what decisions need to be made today.
Right, so we've got... Right, so on C, I'd like to amend that we are changing that from a 3 months, sorry, my eyes are going a bit funny, 3 months rollover to rectify the arrears, and at the end of 3 months, either their licence is not renewed if they remain in arrears. I'd like to change that so we get rid of their licence is not renewed if they remain in arrears. I think that needs to be cancelled out. And we need to change the arrears, and in 3 months rollover, we need to give people 6 to 12 months with a case-by-case payment plan, the council working with the community to rectify the arrears.
Slowly, just so that Therese can capture that so councillors can see. Do you have it written down, Elizabeth? You could give it to Therese, please.
Yep, I can do that. So I'll read it slowly. So we're changing the 3 months rollover to a 6 to 12 months rollover with a case-by-case payment plan with the council staff working with the community to rectify the arrears. And then getting rid of I, which is their licence is not renewed if they remain in arrears.
Can you just check that what has been written on the board is what you're saying, just so we can all see the same thing?
Yes, correct.
Were there other amendments you wanted to make?
Yes, there are. Endorsing the consultation process. I think we need to, there's quite a few things in the consultation process. So a subsection 1 would be, it needs the consultation for the deed of licence needs to be between the leasee and the leaseor. Section 2, that we may need to consider extending the time for consultation as required to reach an agreement on the deed of licence and the triggers. And that any lateral connections for water/wastewater involves consultation with the hut owners, as well as going into the next long-term plan for public consultation. Four, that we will consider the use of high significance for the consultation around the deed of license and the triggers. And 5, to remove the term finite and be based on agreed upon triggers. Agreed upon triggers.
Sorry. No, we can't. Can you? Is that?
I was just suggesting that C2 might need to be amended because it contradicts itself regarding rolling over for a further 6 to 12 months, and the also ending. So maybe just taking out rolled over until the 1st of August 2026, if they are fully remediated.
Is that your intent, Elizabeth? Any further amendments? Okay. Is there a seconder for those amendments? Lydia?
Yeah, I'm happy to second C.
You're second.
I'm just trying to read E, but I'm happy to second C. I think it gives a good pragmatic approach to fixing the arrears, but I'm just trying to read E. That's all that.
One, the consultation between the leasee and the leaseor is specifically for the deed of license.
And okay, thank you. And Lydia, just confirming you're seconding all of it.
I'll second it, but I think I'd like to. Can we hear from staff?
Yeah, we will hear from if it's seconded.
I'm going to second that so that we can actually have the discussion around it.
Right. Can I ask the staff down the end? Can you give us some feedback on what's been presented and?
I'll invite legal colleagues to feedback as well. I guess it ceases to be a 12-month rollover if we're actually extending the period of time for the rollover. So we're proposing a rollover until the 30th of June 2026. And so the implications of what is proposed have implications for all of the rollovers, even those that have fully paid up. And I draw that to your attention. It contradicts, because by the 1st of July 2026, we would expect to have the new terms, the revised terms and conditions, and the adjusted licence fee charges enacted. This goes beyond that as a rollover, so it's not entirely clear what that means. And I do believe that it's being consulted on in terms of E is an annual plan process as opposed to an LTP process, but I'll get my legal colleagues to kind of speak to other matters there.
Sure, we might tag team this, so I'll start and Dom will pick up anything I miss. So the first one is the consultation is between the licensor and the licensee already, so that is already part of the proposed approach. I agree. I think Denise has already covered the second point in terms of, and the third point around building that all into the annual plan consultation, which is already planned as a subsequent stage. In terms of with high significance, that would undermine approval of the consultation document today, because we would have to go back and reconsider all our recommendations onto approach for significance. Our consultation policy does specifically, significance negation policy does have specific terms in it around where we're dealing with something that is high significance for a community versus high significance for the public overall. So we would have to go back and reconsider approach, and it would defeat the resolution. And in terms of finite, we're not actually proposing under any of the options. We haven't used the words finite under the options. There's a reference to a previous decision of council. We can remove that reference to the previous decision of council.
Thank you for that. Sharon, was there anything else you wanted to add? No, I think that's... Okay, Deborah?
I just want to ask a question of our legal team in regards to the licence not be renewed if they remain in arrears at the end of 3 months, or if it's the 9 months. Just trying to understand that under section 61(2)(b) of the Reserve Management Act, a breach of a licence, the council may terminate that lease. That still stands. That does not change any of the outcomes. And where the land together with improvements shall revert back to the leaseor without compensation. So that still exists under the Reserves Act.
I'm sorry, I haven't got those particular provisions in front of me, so I can't.
So my apologies, because
on them specifically.
Because there's also section 91 of the Reserve Act, which means holding a debt in accounts in anticipation of revenue for managing administration, protecting, improving, and ensuring each debit balance is cleared within 2 years. I want to understand if those provisions are steadfast, of how we are interpreting our fees collection with regards to the hut fees, and that impacts on the rollover. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the longer this process goes on, if you were a ratepayer, you would be charged a 5% penalty on non-payment of rates. I guess none of that's come up and been mentioned. Are staff actually adding a 5% penalty on the non-payment of rates as per every other ratepayer in our district? Because that's important, because the longer non-payment goes out, and how we collect that non-payment when the Crown own the land and the only asset may actually be the dwelling that is on the land to be able to claim back any of those arrears. And basically, once you have arrears that are more than what your property valuation is, where does that leave us with regards to enforcement or the collection of those rates? It's some of the questions I know that need to be asked, but I'm just highlighting that I think for clarity's sake, we need to quite clearly sit with regards to the arrears of their licence fees and rates, because we can't have one rule for rates for one part of our community and a different rule for rates for another part of our community.
So just starting on that is, I think we will ask Alison to talk around the rates, penalties, sort of stuff. In terms of the right to cancel, to give you a formal, fulsome response, I'll need to deliver that to you offline after the meeting. One thing I would like to raise, though, as the note is the difference between the 12-month renewal and whatever the next licence ends up being. What the decision today is on the 12-month renewal. We're not considering that next final licence, other than what is the consultation response around it.
I was just going to add that by removing licence is not renewed if remain in arrears, there's actually no solutions going forward now contained as to what happens with the arrears, other than a note for a... So, yep, the amendment basically potentially leaves no solution in place, and that could be problematic for council in terms of revenue.
Yeah, just responding to Deborah's comments. So 5% is charged as rates penalties, which is in keeping with how we treat everything else.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, for pointing that part out. I was primarily going to mention that in C2, as it stands now, the mention of August was actually in the original motion. So if we're saying that August, I thought the response was that August doesn't make it a 12-month thing. August has been in there the whole time, so if that should be July, then perhaps that needs to be noted there. I'm just querying that.
I guess my response was in regards to the rollover period. By the time that period is rolled over, it will have moved into the new fee, the new licence fee. And so it is no longer a rollover, it's something else. But yeah.
Okay, so the date itself isn't really a problem.
No, if it's able to align up with the introduction of the revised terms and conditions and the revised licence fee from the 1st of July, then it could be accommodated, but it's not a rollover. That period has passed.
Okay. I guess in that sense then, based on that and what Sharon has mentioned, I would ask whether Elizabeth is willing to let I come back in, but as a swap them round, so that first the intention is that it'll be remediated, but if it doesn't, if they remain in arrears, there's still the option that the licence would be cancelled if they haven't paid up by the end of that period.
We'll come back to that at the right of return, because there might be some other things that are raised you might want to address. Megan?
So my comments were about the original. It's not particular to the amended resolution, it was to the whole resolution.
Should we just stick with the amendments for now and we'll come back to the full amendment? So has anybody got any other views on the amendment as put forward? No? Elizabeth, you can have right a reply on the things that have been raised.
Yeah, so at the moment, the bit that I've asked to remove is which is the licence is not renewed if they remain in arrears. If they've got a payment plan and they haven't paid it all off within that specific time, but they are working towards paying it off, then they will still be in arrears. So by this, it actually says that we're revoking their licence regardless of whether they have a payment plan. I think the importance here is that we're seeking to enable the community to pay their arrears as they are able to, and we have a case-by-case assistance with the staff to better work through this. So I see that as contradictory, and I would like specifics from staff around how that would not be the case.
To be honest, I'm getting a little bit confused, but I think it's the sub-clause 2 that's throwing it. If we're saying, agree that the licence holders who are in arrears are given 6 to 12 months with a case-by-case payment, so taking it to continue and rectify that at the end of this period, as long as there's an understanding, and it might need to be clarified, that at the end they would then move into the new and revised. It's just a bit around rolling over a licence that is impacted by that.
Maybe we'll just see whether this passes, and then if it does, then we can clear. It's hard on screen with the different colours and the things crossed out to know what's actually there, so there may need to be a further amendment. Let's just see if this passes, and if it does, we can deal with that, and if it doesn't, then we don't need to deal with it. Is there a particular change that you'd like for what's there, and then I can see if Lydia's happy to shift that?
Around what Denise has said about the concerns around it rolling over, I'm not sure how the licence rolling over is a problem if they have a payment plan to pay their arrears. So I'm trying to understand why that needs changing.
Like I said, I apologise, I'm getting confused, but I think the intent of what you're proposing is that you agree that licence holders who are in arrears are given 6 to 12 months with a payment plan. So that's not a rollover, it's a case-by-case payment plan to work with the community to rectify the arrears. Yeah.
We're gonna put it to the vote.
Get my to go. You are allowing amendments to amendments when the original amendment hasn't been voted on. Yeah. It's out of order. You can't wordsmith documents continuously through. If you present amendments under standing orders, they should be concise and to the point and not be continually wordsmithed. I know it's an attractive proposition to do that, but if we're going to present amendments, they should be with clarity and presented correctly and voted on, not continually wordsmithed.
Thanks, Grant. So we're coming to the vote on what is there in front of us. It's been moved by Elizabeth and seconded by Lydia. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against say no. No. Declare it lost. So we have now back to the original wording that was in front of us. Are there any further changes or amendments, or people just want to speak to what's sitting in front of us now? First up is Megan.
I don't have any amendment. I just have some comments to share. And it was good to hear from the community once again, and my comments don't relate to that part of the session. My comments relate to what I've heard actually from around this table. And it's really disappointing to hear from my colleagues continue to use rhetoric that council are motivated to kick people out of their homes, and that it's been accused of some of my colleagues around this table that they're only actually making a decision to get themselves further elected for another term. And I think that's really poor governance, because that's not what we're doing today. There's been a decision that was made in March 2024, which was to extend the term of the lease, not to bring it to an end, to actually extend it and give people some certainty of time. And the decision that's being made today is actually just to say, we need a short-term rollover so we can do proper engagement with the community, and I actually can't see what's controversial about that. And when it comes to making a good decision around, well, should we have a term on a lease? It's absolute common practice for everybody to have terms on leases these days. The only time I've seen in perpetuity leases have been in past years, in past actually centuries and decades, which are not considered appropriate for modern times. They're usually connected to trying to right a wrong, and they bind councils who are managing the land into arrangements that might not be fit for purpose in the future. They're archaic, they're outdated, they're very uncommon in New Zealand, and they could actually have an unintended consequence of meaning the people who actually are leasing the property can't borrow against the property. because terms need to be defined for banks to give you a loan. So we might actually be causing more harm by not having a set term that hasn't been fully investigated. And so from my perspective, I think that it is appropriate to have a set term. I think it's really important in a dynamic coastal environment where we actually need to make decisions around health and safety. I don't have a position on what that term is, but I just wanted to support the motion and say that I think it's entirely appropriate for any lease or licence arrangement to have a set term and no longer be in perpetuity. So that's all I wanted to say.
Look, I put this pretty clear earlier, and I'll keep it really simple in the essence of time. And point C, I think, should be changed to 6 months to rectify arrears. It gives a pragmatic approach. And point E, as I pointed to earlier, I think that option 3 of the consultation document should be the adopted option, with the changes to include another option that has no word final, finite or non-renewable in around the 33 years. I don't see how including that would actually postpone a consultation document going out. What it is giving an option that we already know people want into a consultation document. So my proposal would be for C to be changed to 6 months, and for E to be option 3, approve the consultation document with some amendments.
So that will be not an amendment to this that could be put forward if this is lost, because that last part is contrary to the amendment that's...
Oh, sorry, I thought this was already lost.
No, so we've got the original amendments. If we could just clear up the screen and get rid of all the yellow and everything that was debated through the previous... An amendment to C is allowable to move from 3 to 6 months, but to change the consultation option is a vote no to what's currently on the table, and then we would have to pick something else up, which might be that different consultation option.
Very well.
And I think we heard before that the intent from the legal team was to remove the word finite from that future consultation, so...
If we do come to that amendment, I just have we had some questions you noted around, was there anything that prevented, and I've got some comments if we get there.
Julie, you need to speak up.
Sorry, I can comment on, I do have a couple of comments on that last option if we get there as an amendment.
So we'll come to that if what's here is lost and we come back to an amended consultation. Okay? Lydia, does that cover the intent? We need a seconder for the change from 3 to 6 months. Bob's seconded.
Can we speak to that first or not?
Speak to it once we've got it clarified what's there. It's another amendment. Only speaking to the 3 to 6 months. No.
C still isn't, it's still got this wording in it.
Let's keep the meeting moving by just looking at the 3 to 6 month piece, which has been moved by Lydia and seconded by Bob, and we'll deal with getting that back to the original wording for the rest of it once we've done that. So the first speaker is Elizabeth.
I'm trying to pull out my information. Off the top of my head, we've got $50,000 owing, Lydia, by that community. Are we in arrears? Are we expecting that community to find $50,000 to be paid off in 6 months' time, given they are our most vulnerable community, if we're not having the option of a case-by-case payment plan? Does this, just to clarify, does this mean that council will not have a case-by-case payment plan and they must pay within 6 months, or then they will lose their licence to live on that property and will be evicted? Is that what we are saying?
If I go back to the original recommendation, was that they have 3 months to rectify, and otherwise they those terms that were specified, their licence is not whatever those two clauses were.
Your recommendation last.
Denise, we'll come back to you. Is there any other speakers on the 3 to 6 years? Shane?
Yeah, thanks. Man.
3 to 6 months.
It's my understanding that the original proposal, that was 3 months, if the intention was to have that paid off in 3 months, then there's $50,000 paid off in 3 months, then I don't think there's any financial hardship there. If the point being that is to rectify and you enter into an agreement within that 3 months to sort it out, then you'll be okay. I don't even know what planet I'm on at the moment. We seem to be making stuff up to put stuff in, and it's making it worse. You're going to end up affecting these people worse by wordsmithing rubbish into a document. So just get on with it.
I have a clarification with regards to if you are going to, at the end of 3 months, their licence is not renewed, or even if it says 6 months, their licence is not renewed if they remain in arrears. And then we've got the letter or. And then their licence is rolled over for a further 9 months, also ending the 1st of August 2026, if they have fully remediated the arrears. So what I'm trying to understand in 2 is that if they fully pay up their arrears, then their licence will be rolled over, and because they would have fully remunerated their arrears. That's how I'm reading this. So whether you put in 3 months or 6 months, as long as they pay it off by the 1st of August 2026, right, then they're not deemed to be in arrears. Is that how I should be reading that comment?
Not quite towards the end. So for those that are in arrears, the intention is that there would be a 3-month period given as their rollover and their renewal. In that time, they would have the ability to remedy the default, which is those payments that are owing.
Mm-hmm.
If those aren't remedied within that 3-month period, the licence wouldn't be extended for the balance of the rollover. So in short, the licence comes to an end at that point. The alternate, so it's an either or. If you don't come up to speed with your arrears, one applies. If you are able to repay within those 3 months, the balance of the rollover will be given to 1 August 2026.
Okay.
So which will, beg your pardon, yeah, to
Okay.
align with everybody else. And I think it should actually be, apologies, we've got 1 August there, but in B we've got 1 July, and so I think those should be the same.
And
Both
both
1 July. Thanks, Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. So just with regards to their licence is not renewed, you actually 3 months roll over to rectify the arrears. So when we're talking about to rectify the arrears, should for clarity, rectifying the arrears means entering into a negotiation for payment?
No, rectify arrears means full repayment.
Okay, so this is I guess the stumbling block.
Deborah, we're going
no,
outside
no,
whether it's 3 or 6.
I
So if we
realise
can
that,
just
sorry,
go, is
sorry.
it 3
No.
or 6, and what's your view on 3 or 6?
Okay.
So rectify the arrears at the end of 3 months, but it's still not going to, for me, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, it's still, if they haven't paid or rectified anything, then they're still caught by the fact that they won't get a rollover for another 9 months or whatever, ending the 1st of July 2026.
And you can choose to vote on that accordingly when we get to it. Yep. Anyone else on 3, 6 months? Sophie?
Yep. If the intention is to do 6 months and 6 months, then I'm happy to second that one as an amendment if it passes, mainly because sometimes it takes a while to make those arrangements, and I do understand that that means that if people haven't fully remediated or then they may lose their home. But as we all received a letter earlier, which I appreciate that it is a vulnerable community. However, this letter makes it clear that there are several people in the community who have chosen deliberately to not pay those rates.
It's one person.
Okay.
You can't jump to a conclusion.
And equally, there are other things that we cannot assume. Either way, it's a known cost, and everybody has signed a deed of license. If it was anything out, like if it was any standard lease, this wouldn't even be a question, unfortunately. So we're just trying to make it better in this particular instance. It's not an unknown cost. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else you want to say, Lydia?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a pragmatic solution that's going to suit everybody. You know, we put forward an amendment, Elizabeth, and unfortunately it didn't pass. I seconded it and supported you in that, but it didn't pass. And so what I'm trying to do is find the best solution for everybody, because if I didn't propose something, we would end up with 3 months. So we have to be pragmatic in this and go, actually, what is an acceptable solution of 6 months? We divide that up. You know, it's fairly achievable. 6 months gives a better time frame, especially where people are going to get a rates notice in July. So, you know, I just see it as a pragmatic middle ground approach to put 6 months in here. It's clear, it's easy to understand, and, you know, I'll touch on the point of, you know, I've been pretty consistent with Upper Selwyn Huts over the time, since March last year, in trying to come up with a good solution for a community. So it's not exactly about me wanting to get re-elected or anything. It's about me trying to do the best situation for people and get a good decision around this table.
Okay, all those in favour of 6 months, say aye. Anyone against 6 months, say no. Declare it carried. Are there any further people that would like to speak to this? Deborah.
This may have to be an amendment because the 6th, sorry.
I think we've had...
No. I want to speak.
Just explain yourself, Deborah, before we move to, is there going to be an amendment?
We've just approved 6 months, so for correction, their licence is rolled over for a further 6 months? Yeah, it should be 6 and 6, but that's not what was actually, I can't read it. It's 6, it is 6 and 6. No, it's still got 9 up there. It's 9. It says their licence is rolled over for a further 9 months. It should be 6 months. So
that
it
is
ends
correct.
So it ends on the 1st. That's the correct. That's what should be written there.
Yeah, that's just getting caught up with what Sophie had said in the debate before. So that was the intention of what was voted on.
Okay, can we please have it corrected?
Are there any further comments on this? Okay, so we now have this as a substantive motion. I think the changes are clearly in front of us. It was moved and seconded earlier in the meeting. So all those in favour, say aye. Anyone against, say no. Okay, declare it carried. And thank you everyone for the conversation on this topic. It's obviously a big matter for us, and I really appreciate the public forum who've come in today to participate and also to witness this part of the decision making. We now move on to an item that we'll bring forward, which is the WSCCO meeting. Yeah, so we have got the need to move on to another paper. Can I ask councillors if we could have an extension beyond the 2 hours to do that? Move Shane, seconded Sophie. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Cool. Apologies from Megan and Elizabeth noted. Okay, we're on page 34 of 333. This is the local water done well incorporation of CCO. Julie is coming back, is it? Tim, are you able to start
We can start.
the matter?
Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, councillors. The paper it has quite a bit of detail in it, so I'll consider it mostly read and just touch on a few key points. But I thought I would start by just drawing your attention to the decision timeline in the appendices of the paper. We're currently addressing Block 1 decisions. On the 7th, we briefed on the draft constitution and statement of expectations. And today we are looking for a decision to adopt the constitution, authorise the incorporation of Selwyn Water Limited, and the appointment of Murray Strong to initial director for Selwyn Water Limited. And if you excuse me, I've left my glasses. Apologies. So a little bit on the process. For the remaining decisions, we will run either a workshop or a briefing that will precede the required decision as identified in the document. So you will always have time to properly consider and provide feedback prior to being asked to make any decision. To note, this is an indicative timeline from April. And although we don't expect significant change, if there is, this will be updated and those changes flagged as we go. Regarding the Constitution and Statement of Expectation, we received clear feedback on the 7th of May briefing that these documents did not contain a sufficient level of detail, particularly around the community engagement and alignment with Selwyn District's council strategies. We've taken that on board and reflected that feedback into this constitution. There was also a preference for us to workshop the statement of expectation prior to issuing, and this workshop is tentatively scheduled for August. So a decision on the statement of expectation has been deferred from Block 1 decisions until we have conducted that workshop in August. Some feedback received on the 7th has not been included in this iteration of the Constitution. If it hasn't, it will be for discussion in the workshop in August, and the details along with the reasons why they have not been included are detailed in the paper. The paper also recommends the appointment of Murray Strong as initial director of Selwyn Water Limited for a term of 3 years. Note the intentional mistake in the paper. It is 3, not 4. Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Glidham. And this aligns with the core directorships as well. Regarding the initial appointment, at the end of last year, we conducted a robust process to initially appoint an establishment chair, and Murray has been in place carrying out the role of establishment chair since the 6th of January. At that time, we were looking to establish the WSCCO in early July, which is why the initial period was identified for his appointment through to the 1st of July. It was always the intention, dependent on the decision to move ahead with the WSCCO, to establish an initial director as part of the process at this time. With the recent decision to transition to a full WSCCO in December, we're looking to appoint Murray into the role of initial director of Selwyn Water Limited for the next 3 years. Murray has the appropriate skill set and background understanding of Selwyn District Council's local water done well requirements, and will provide the necessary continuity required through transition to the WSCCO. Discussion around remaining directorships is ongoing, and we will bring that back to Council along with an updated director policy shortly. Julie, is there anything you want to add in regard to?
No, just on that timeline, I just wanted to clarify. So what we're proposing today is that Murray is appointed as an initial director for that 3-year term to allow for the incorporation. It won't alter the decision that Council has made on the 6th of January, where he was appointed as establishment chair until the 1st of July. As discussed at the briefing, we will be doing a refresh of the trustee and director appointment policy, which we will be bringing to you in June. And then subsequent to that policy being approved in July, we will bring the full board REM pay scale for approval at that time. So we're proposing that Murray continues on his current terms with no change and no new decision around that.
Thank you. And so just clarifying the decisions, this is interim decisions. And so the wording that we have here doesn't necessarily give that as clearly as I think the intention is, which is in the paper. So is there some language that you think we should add to that?
Yes, that was Sharon raised that with us this morning, and I have some proposed alternate language that we can put forward to make that really clear.
Okay. Do you have that?
I do have that, and I'll forward it to Therese now.
Do you want us to read that out, Sam?
You can read it out, and then while it's being forwarded, that's fine. And Therese, then you've got it to copy and paste.
Okay. So B, do you want me to do that, Julie? B, we have approved the adoption of an initial constitution for Selwyn Water Limited in the form appended to the paper, and the addition is subject that this will be reviewed and amendments proposed as required, post a further workshop with Council prior to full transfer of all waste and drinking water assets.
Great. We'll send that to you, Therese, rather than trying to copy that fast. Yeah.
Didn't get that, Therese?
And similar for the next one, Tim, is it?
And similar for the next one. So the addition to C after of 3 years is with his remuneration, bracketed, and that of a future board, bracketed, to be set in July, subsequent approval of a refreshed trustee and director appointment policy being brought to Council for briefing and decision in June.
Okay, they'll get added to the behind me so you can see what they are, but there's no reason we can't continue to have some conversation on the rest of the paper and the decisions that are there. So does anybody have any views on this? Move Shane, seconded. Malcolm. Further discussion? Sophie.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for incorporating a lot of the changes that we suggested. I get that this isn't, there is still potentially more to go, but we threw a lot at you the other day, and actually quite a bit has been changed in there, and thank you for circulating the track document. It would have been nice for it to be in the agenda, but it was good to have it by email, because it was good to see exactly where those changes have been made, and basically just thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Nicole.
Hi, thanks for this. Just on, sorry, I can't see what page it is, but it's on the section 5 next steps. So under workshop on constitution and statement of expectations, just want clarification on part B, accountability, so including performance expectations. What are you meaning by performance expectations?
Sorry, could you point me back to that again?
So it's section 5, the next steps, B, accountability, and in brackets including performance expectations. So
at the moment I don't have a proposal for what that might mean. So
Okay.
we would bring that to the workshop, with you. We would bring proposals at that time.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you. Lydia.
I thank you for addressing some of my questions outside of this and for sending track changes so we can see, and I appreciate that, you, again, what Sophie said, you have accommodated many of our thoughts into that. I still don't feel like it's good enough. I feel like we're on a speeding bus and we're leaving everyone behind and we need to do better. I don't think that I'm not satisfied with the interim, is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, I agree with the way forward, but I just am not agreeing with the process of how this is happening. Great to work through transparency, accountability, public consultation, and community engagement, but these are all retrospective things that we're going to be adding in, and I'm not okay with how it's progressing. If we're going to talk about, we are going to talk about the appointment of a director. In my view, you don't appoint a director for a 3-year term without terms and without remuneration considerations. And, it just doesn't sit right with me to do that, to just roll that over. And, it's not the right process. So, if we appoint a director on the current terms as an interim, we're setting a precedent for ongoing, because we're not negotiating terms, remuneration at the appointment process and time. Although I think it's great that we're reviewing the appointment and remuneration of directors and trustees policy, I just think these things should align and stack up together. There's a lot of other things that I think should be workshopped into there. I talked about quarterly reports. It doesn't have to be presented, but it could just be circulated to us when we're talking about the CCO. The resolutions still don't quite sit right with me around the process.
Thanks, Lydia. Sharon?
Yeah, thanks, Lydia, and thanks for the questions that you sent through to me and the responses I gave. I think the team have set out this is part of the mechanical steps that we've outlined, I think, to Council, and we're clear that the July is the establishment of a Council CCO. We know that the Bill 3 is coming through, so the July is important to make sure that we have an established director. We have taken on board the feedback, and that's really important because we are legally obliged to have a director in place, and with regards to the same terms and conditions that have been agreed with Murray up until the point where we then get into that discussion in July, once the policy has been updated, which councillors have asked for, which we're going to bring back, and then we have that open conversation. I don't think that is too out of whack, for the want of a better word.
Thanks, Sharon. Grant?
Not speaking to the Constitution, but I suppose I want to add weight to what Lydia, Elizabeth and Megan have said. I'm very concerned about the timeliness of information and correctness that we're receiving as governors, and the ability for us to actually read, think and make conscious decisions. As an example, and I'm not picking on you, Tim, we're having a wordsmithing of the document as we're trying to read it on the day, which could or might not be material, but as a governor, I fail to see how these things are getting in the agenda and being approved to come to the agenda when they're not correct. To me, it smacks of not enough care being taken in the agenda preparation and delivery, and we are bearing the brunt of that by being asked to pick up stuff on the fly, consider it, and make decisions. I just don't think it's good enough for us as a council for this to be happening. I think we've got an in-house legal team now, which before we might have sort of blamed, oh well, we've got to wait for our opinions and things. But I will support this constitution today. But I guess the tone of how things have been going, and it's just a bit concerning to me. And I just want to register that in the minutes that I think we'd like to do better from my perspective.
Thanks, Grant. Deborah.
Thank you. I would like to agree with Lydia. I'm really concerned that we have outdated policy, trying to find the policies with regards to this particular one around appointment and remuneration. We're making a recommendation here today, and consequently we don't have the update policy. So what I would like to see in this constitution is the recognition that our policies are living documents. They will always move with the times. And while we have a constitution and you put a particular policy in it, then as Megan pointed out, constitutions are very hard to change. So there needs to be something in the constitution that quite clearly explains, like a district plan, that council policy is a living document. It is subject to change. So we really need to consider some words that cover this recommendation, because I still read it as our existing, if we adopt this, we're adopting it under our existing policy, which we know is up for renewal. It needs to be renewed. We've got the cart before the horse. And I think I want a change to make sure that any policies that we actually bring to council that are a requirement to be considered under the Constitution or adhered to under Constitution need to be mentioned as living documents in the interpretation. So I'm adding something today, and I'll move that as an amendment, if possible, with regards to the Constitution. If not, I think this is such an important issue that until we've had an opportunity to understand, just lay on the table.
Deborah, what's your amendment? I'm not even clear what the...
I'm trying to actually find the track changes because they were sent to us separately and I'm trying to be diligent, right? But my concern is quite clearly what's been pointed out in the track changes and in the explanation that our appointment process with regards to directors, and sorry, I can't even draw the policy up because I'm on diligent, right, needs to be reviewed. We talked about it, right?
So that is, and that was part of the...
And I know, but what I'm trying to explain here is we're always going to be in the situation where a policy is a living document and the wordsmithing around that needs to be considered as a variation. So if we lock ourselves into a policy in a constitution, trying to change that policy is a very hard process to go through. So there needs to be some wordsmithing around policies, acknowledging they are living documents, they're subject to change, but the up-to-date policy needs to be considered in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that needs an amendment to what's in front of us because that is the process that's currently underway, but Sharon?
So I just wanted to chunk this down. There is several pieces at play here. So with regards to the appointment of Murray Strong, I think, and forgive me, I might have been out of the room when the team articulated this. What we have described as that there is a transition period for the CCO. And so from July to the bill, we need to have a council CCO established. And when the bill is acted, it then transfers into a full water CCO. What you're being asked here is that we need to have a director in place from 1 July for the period of time until the bill is enacted. And we recognise that so it's on Murray's same terms and conditions which council endorsed, because that is still within the time frame of his that he'll be contracted. And then recognising councillors asked us to bring the policy back updated, which we will do. And so the next stage is that when it comes to finalising remuneration, that will be a discussion and a negotiation between councillors and endorsement and Murray with regards to what the remuneration will be. So the appointment of the director part is on the same terms and conditions that he is currently on, that was approved by council. We're not asking to set his director remuneration fee yet until July, until you've updated and you've agreed to the policy which we have committed to bringing back to you in June. If we don't have an appointed director by 1 July, there are consequences, and Julie would have to explain that because that's outside of my swim lane, with regards to fulfilling the commitments.
It's just part of the process, so
yeah.
that's just...
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I think it's something that was covered when maybe you're out of the room. Deborah, sorry, we'll have to come back to you. You've turned your microphone off. Elizabeth.
I'd like to propose a motion that we leave this on the table and we come back to this after a workshop, and that we bring the workshop forward.
It's a procedural motion. It'll need a seconder if that is supported. Seconded by Lydia. It just needs to be put to the meeting. There's consequences to this which do need to be explained though before it's put to the meeting, because we need to understand what those consequences would look like, Julie.
So the impact of that would be to unwind the decision that was made in April. We could not establish a water...
No, to delay for next week.
Oh, to delay for next week.
Yeah.
We can. There's no legal consequence of delaying a week.
Okay. So there's no debate on this. It's whether it either happens or it doesn't happen.
It has to happen.
All those...
No.
Which we can do next week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify with Julie just what you've said there. The workshop wouldn't be till next week. The decision won't be next week. Does that still stand?
No. If there was if the decision was delayed, and we weren't able to have the entity in place in June, it would, in effect, unwind
but before that,
the April decision.
Okay. Well, let us put it to the meeting. All those in favour of delaying the decision, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. All those in favour of carrying on with it today, declare it lost or carry on. Deborah, okay, you turned your microphone off. Was there something else?
Yes, there was. We talk about the policy about remuneration, but the policy also had a part B to it with regards to the applicants who apply or for the position actually are what's needed with regards to, as Sophie said, if we need environmental, we get environmental, etc. So we get a range. We just don't end up with lawyers and accountants.
And that is part of the thinking, but do you want to touch on that, Julie?
Really needs to
yes. So we are considering that. I had that exact conversation with Sharon this morning around reporting on skills matrices and putting that into the policy. Yes.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, actually, you pretty much covered everything I was going to say. But I think this report makes it pretty clear, and I get those bits have been added, I think mostly following some conversations with Lydia to clarify exactly how that all follows, and that's great to have it in there. It's I don't think any of that is anything that wasn't really signalled in the workshop that we already had and that was quite detailed. And in the report that we've got here, yes, we know that this is like a high-speed train that's moving quickly, but we have had an awful lot of conversation about this, and we are pretty. If people aren't clear on where we're going yet, then this has been ongoing for years as well. So if you need a mover or a seconder, then
it's been moved on seconded. There's no further questions. So all those in favour of the proposal is in front of us, say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you for presenting that paper. I'm just going to check with the meeting. There's a number of things that are still to be discussed, and I don't want to rush and push them through. We've created an extraordinary meeting on Wednesday next week, knowing that some of the items today we weren't going to get to, and my suggestion is that we close this meeting now with the unresolved matters moved to the agenda for next Wednesday. And so that I don't even think we need to move and second that. I just thought I'd let you know that is the as my thinking, and I'm seeing some nods around, but Grant, is there?
There's nothing on here that the staff need for us to pass today to be working on.
No. So we'll come back to those in 7 days. It'll be a publicly advertised meeting again, and look forward to the discussion next week. Thank you all for the contribution today. There was some good, deep and broad conversation, particularly around Selwyn Huts, and we took on board everyone's views through that. Thank you for your patience with me in chairing that part of the meeting. I'm going to close with karakia.
Sorry, Sam, I just had one question. There's nothing in PX that needs to be resolved today?
That was all moved to next week anyway.
Okay, roger.
Unahia, te po, kia wātia, ai, kua wātia. Kia ora everyone, thank you for that